Okay. Let's bring that audio down. Tell me if that volume's too loud on that music. Hopefully it's not too loud. Tell me if my voice is too loud. Okay, let's do this.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Markowsky, and today we're going to be looking at some of my favorite paintings by some of my favorite viewers. So, some of the great artists who've been part of this community. Some of you have been watching and painting along with me since maybe over a year now. So, that's super exciting. And I'm super honored to have such a great community of people who are participating and who are uploading their photos to the Facebook group. So let's take a quick look. Let's go right into it. There we go. Okay. So, if you are watching and you'd love to participate in this and get some feedback by myself, then you can join our private Facebook group. And there's a link, I think it's the very first thing in the video description down there below. And you'll see all of, oh, cool. So that's how to, that's where I'm pulling all the images from. So I'll mention that in a second. I also thought it might be kind of just worth just mentioning just for anyone who's interested in joining. And oops, this is our, well, this is a mistake to show you this, but this is actually the entire How to Paint class that we did from September to February, I think we did all these. So if you're wanting to paint a Warhol painting, or David Hockney, Frida Kahlo, Emily Carr, Vincent van Gogh, Claude Monet, Gustav Klimt, Thomas Kincaid, all of these fellows and ladies here. But let's dive. Oh, what I wanted to show you, why am I showing you this? Because I wanted to show you the names of the artists that are coming up shortly here. So on Tuesday, we're going to be looking at James Gurney, who is an amazing, do I have a book of his around here? I do. I think I've mentioned his artwork before. And let me just show you. This is a great book of his. I've read this one, and he's got another one called, I think it's like fantastic realism or something. How to paint what doesn't exist, I think is what it's called. Both are great books. This is a brand new one from the library. The one I had lots of paint all over it. But he's also another YouTuber, and the reason why we're doing a video on him is it's his birthday on Monday, so we're gonna do a belated birthday episode on James Gurney. And you can let me even see here. Here's a video that he does here, James Gurney. Super interesting guy. These are awesome videos. We have a little bit of a different approach to painting, him and I. So it'll be kind of interesting to see, because I'm going to take my approach that I've been using for the past 85 paintings or so and apply it to James Gurney. But I thought it'd be kind of interesting for you just to get a little idea of that. Miriam Shapiro, we're going to do a really cool painting of hers. Actually, all these these three paintings and the Agnes Pelton painting are kind of Father's Day themed paintings. And a Jared Sokoto painting, South African artist, a great, we're actually going to paint, that's a special bonus episode we'll be doing on Father's Day itself, the Sunday day. Beautiful painting of a father holding his baby child, I think son. And then the Monday, or the Tuesday after this, Francisco Goya, why do I see Goyo? Goya is probably, I'm sure probably the greatest Spanish artist. Maybe him and Velázquez would be competition. But Goya, very famous painting of Saturn eating his son. I was going to put that on our Father's Day episode, but I thought some people would find that a little too perverse. But I'm sure thoughts like that have probably occurred to every parent out there. But it definitely probably his most famous painting. And then Ken Danby for Canada Day, his most famous painting called In the Crease of a goaltender. And there's some other stuff coming with the Paint the News, so let me just kind of... there's a few ones. The one we're going to be doing here, the Quebec flag, an early version of the Quebec flag, the Carillon Sacré-Cœur, which is... I just thought, when I was doing some research on Saint Jean-Baptiste Day, I came across this image, which I'd never seen before, which is this... anyway, it's like... You'll see. I'll be posting all those things. So stay tuned for all of those cool things coming down the pipelines over this next month. And then all of July, most of July, is going to be dedicated to Canadian Artisan Celebration of Canada Day month. But we are doing a special July 4th painting for American independence, and there'll be a few other international artists scattered throughout there. But people have been asking a lot about Group of Seven and all that kind of stuff. Tom Thompson will take care of all that. Alexander Colville, and a few names who may be less familiar to some of you, but probably very familiar to some other people, right? As it always goes. So let's jump right in here. Now, where did we leave off? Did we look at the sea turtles already? I can't remember if we looked at sea turtles already. Or you know what? How about, since I know we haven't talked about Amrita Sher-Gil, well, why don't we jump right into that, and then somebody can let me know if we talked about the sea turtles in the previous episode. I don't think we did, but because I'm also commenting on the Facebook page, and then so that's how sometimes I get confused, because did I comment on the Facebook post or in person already? Okay, so here is the original painting by Amrita Sher-Gil from 1936, and why don't let's go down here to look at Charmai's version here. So, and I think I got two of them. I'm not sure why I got two of them, so let's take a look. I do see little changes here. So this is not uncommon for any artist to get close to finishing a work, or think of they finished a work and then come back and add more things to it later. Often when I finish an episode, I take the painting upstairs and I put it on our credenza, and which is across from our couch, and we sit there kind of winding down, my wife and I, at the end of the night, and I'm looking at it, and then that's when I see all the things. Oh, you know what, I'm gonna have to go down and do this and that. I don't usually do that, but I see little tiny changes in the clothing. I don't know if I don't see really much in the face. But this is the final version. This is the second one, I think, that was uploaded to the Facebook group. I mean, either version, I think, are fantastic, Charmai. Absolutely gorgeous versions of this particular painting. You really kind of captured the melancholy and sadness in her face, right? There's a lot of, when you look at those eyes, they have that, what do they call that? The thousand yard stare, that kind of blank, looking off into infinity kind of thing. And yeah, I mean, there's nothing I can really say about that. I think that's fantastic. I love all the textures in here. Background looks fantastic as well. There's another thing you uploaded, but I'll get to that one in a bit here. Excuse me. Here's Vanya Elisa's. Same sort of thing. Again, that capturing that look on the face. And I love all the colors in here. Very different approach than Charmai's. A little bit brighter of colors, like in here, which is totally fine. What could I say here? I think little things like, I don't know if the original, oops, let's talk about, like inside the hand, I would expect to be a little bit darker in there. Maybe also underneath her chin, maybe. But it looks good. What I think is nice, it doesn't look like you used any black in here, which is nice. It looks like you've just mixed all the colors yourself, which is what I'm always encouraging people to do. So it looks really nice. Yeah, great job. Oh, wow, look at that, Susan. That is cool. I can't remember. I don't think the original had all of this outlining that you've put on the face. I'm not going to go back and compare it because I just want to look at your paintings as they are. I think this is really cool. It is. It looks. It just really changes her personality. I think with all of those lines on there, it becomes a little bit more hard, right? She seems almost. She seems a little bit tougher in this painting than I think in the original and some of the ones other people have done. So this to me, I get more of a feeling of like of someone who's maybe seen some difficulties but is like, you know what, I am like nothing is going to stop me kind of thing, and I'm just sitting here taking a breath, planning my next how I'm going to take over the world. So this is like the one thing I would say is that if you do a lot of outlining on a face, it tends to make it look a little bit more masculine, and versus which is why a lot of times, like in illustrators, comic book artists often put very few lines on a female face, especially even the nose, and will kind of maybe even like omit a dark line on the bridge of the nose and maybe just a little bit underneath, and then these lines on the, I always should remember this, on above the lip, right, the little dimple on the top of the lip. By adding those there, it does start to kind of hint at maybe a mustache or something there. And just, you know, I have no problems with women and body hair and anything like that. Frida Kahlo, I think, is one of the greatest artists and personalities of all time who let her hair grow all over her body. I think it's super sexy. But I do think that, especially even, you know, we got almost like a little bit of 5 o'clock shadow starting to happen here. So, you know, it's not easy to make a face look more masculine or more feminine. It's really tricky, and it's like a fine-edged sword to walk across some of that stuff. But it's something you sort of, as you work, you kind of are able to start seeing it and kind of manipulate and push a figure one way or the other. Anyway, overall, though, it looks fantastic. Actually, I also really like the way that you did the background, too. I like these little dots up in the corner, too. Down here, there's little patterns happening. Very cool. Wow, and then here's Shelley's version. Like, what? Talk about a very different painting. Like, so it's, wow, this approach to painting, I see, like, dozens and dozens of these tiny little marks that you've put on here, which is really a different approach. And I'm wondering, I wonder how you managed to get this. I wonder if that's, my instinct would tell me that there's either a lot of water or medium in here, like maybe slow dry medium in the paint, or just a lot of water, so that we're getting this a little bit of a semi-transparent quality of the paint. I do like it. I think it is very interesting. So if we look at the face here, like look how there's really no lines on your face at all, right? And so we have these which is kind of difficult because you've got to then manage the different aspects of the face with just light and dark and different colors, right, to cause the distinction between the nose and the cheek and you know the ridge of the nose and the eyebrows, all this sort of things. So I love seeing this. I love seeing like the distinction in different people's styles and approaches, right? Even just between Susan and Shelley here. Very cool. I've got a bunch here, so I'm going to keep on plowing ahead. Oh, and here's Peter's version here. It looks like slightly out of focus, but I think we get the gist of it. And it looks like, you know, just what we were talking about, some of these lines. These lines are either the pencil lines or maybe the underpainting, a little bit of black that we then painted over top of. And same thing in the hands. All of that looks great. The one thing I might suggest to do is keeping some of these lines off of the nose, but potentially just like the top eyelid going back over top with a little bit of black, because I see you've got some black elsewhere here. Oh, let's go. Where did that go? Like just the top eyelid, and then maybe the iris and pupil itself, and then leaving. You could do the eyebrows too, but leaving the nose. You may want to put like a little bit of a line underneath, like where just the nostril is, and maybe define just the line between the mouth. Like just that level of subtlety, so that we have a darker line on, like, or a lighter line on the nose, but a little bit darker on the eyes itself. Just because I think that will pop those colors, or the darkness through some of this layer of paint that you've put over top of it. But really cool. I also just like the way that it's painted too. There's a similar kind of thing in the weirdest way to the way that Shelley also applied the paint on here, right? So I can start seeing another style happening in here. And then there is Deborah, or sorry, this is Paula. Sorry, I saw in the chat there Josh was saying hi to Deborah. Turn this. Paula, that looks great. I love the way that you've. It's interesting. I always get the sense that maybe your camera is compressing the image a little bit. I could be wrong, but I always feel like I want to stretch it back out. So I wonder if this is a full page of a sketchbook, and for whatever reason, when it gets uploaded, it kind of squishes in a little bit. Either way, I think this is, again, a very interesting approach to this painting. It looks like it's watercolor on paper, because I think you're painting in your sketchbook, right? And I think you're hand eyeballing these images, which, you know, if this face, drawing that by eye, is gorgeous, gorgeous version of this face. You know, it looks like the head is maybe a little bit larger than the arms and hands, so they're a little bit out of proportion, a little bit smaller than we might expect. But I don't mind that. I think it's really, you know, there's lots of artists that have made whole careers out of elongating the body or widening the body. One of who we'll talk about in a few, I think in October, Botero, a Latin American artist, who's very famous for widening all of his figures. Yeah, I think this is remarkable. I think this is remarkable the way you've done the face. It's also interesting that you haven't painted the background dark at all, and you lightened it up considerably, which I think also lightens the mood of this painting. Although when we get back to her face, this little bit of blue around the eyes, again, there's like, it infuses it with a little bit of melancholy and sadness, which I think is fantastic. So we still get kind of the initial impulse or idea behind the original painting in there. Wow, May! Look at that! Wow, great painting, May. Wow, you are coming along. That is great. I don't know what to say about this. It is, so, you know, if we think about it, remember I was saying the lines on the face. We do have some lines on the face, like on the nose. I think a big part of the difference here, let me see, which one were we talking about? May and Susan here. Like, this to me, I start getting a little bit of that, you know, the musician Prince. I start thinking, I feel a little bit like this reminds me of Prince a little bit, who I love Prince. But I guess there's a little bit more of an androgynous quality here, and it might just be like, putting a little bit too much attention on her top lip, I think. The other thing I would maybe suggest is so let's say if we did, you know, if you're doing her eye, like even just extending these eyelashes outward, because right now they're, let's say, it just sort of ends here. I guess it is dark up here, but finding a way just to get a couple of extra little lines there, I think might help give it a little bit more of a feminine kind of quality too. Yeah, so I don't mean to pick on you. I think, again, I hope that, because I know that there's like another 100 people that aren't brave enough to show their art here, that are painting along with me every week. And the people that we're looking at are the people that are brave enough and have the courage and are humble enough to submit their work for feedback. So I'm sure that this is an issue that many artists struggle with, and including myself. There's definitely times where I'm painting or making a drawing. I'm drawing a graphic novel right now, and there's times where I'm like, oh, that face is looking, it needs to look a little bit more burly man looking, and there's strategies for doing that. Maybe we'll talk about that at some point today. And then there's strategies for making someone look maybe a little bit more baby-faced, or maybe a little bit younger versus older, all those kind of things, right? I think we talked about a bunch of this in my How to Draw course when we were doing portraits. I think I did some work on that, if that's of interest for people. And if you want to do that whole course, it's free. You can pick and choose a la carte whichever episodes you want to do. They're all there's a link below in the video description there. So I think we talked about May. Yeah, I'm very proud of you on this painting, May. Looks really nice. I always find it so interesting with the texture that you've got in here. Lots of texture, which I think is great. I love. Oh wow, look at that. And Heidi, your version, Heidi, I think to me so far probably looks the closest to the original, and I'm not going to go back to it right now, but just that we've seen so far, in that the way that Amrita Sher-Gil applied paint and had this, what would you say, like the way I'm thinking about that is the paint like on her clothes and even the background. It makes me think of like fog on a window or something. It's very humid and kind of cold, and yet very hot and humid in Vancouver right now. And my daughter and I went to swim class this morning, and on the way back it was like this like battle to keep the windows from fogging up on the car. And Amrita's painting has a bit of that atmosphere. I don't know how to describe it, and so I think you really captured that in this painting. And again, great. You've done a great job on the face. Looks very melancholy, beautiful. Well done. Gale, wow, look at that, Gale. So this one, I also think you've done a great job. I think that the darkness in the background, it's, again, it's interesting to think about, like, how a background can influence the character in the foreground, and the way that the emotion that we might take away from that image just by changing the background. Right, like when we go back to Paula's here, where we have this very light kind of, unripe apple kind of thing, or pear kind of color there, right? Versus here, right? There's a weight to that darkness in the background that I think lends it an extra level of intensity. So just something to think about. Although, well, yeah, I'll go down a rabbit hole, but that looks great. What can I say? Again, even just the way that you painted all these flowers and everything has that same thing I was just talking about with Heidi's painting. Interesting. Dolores, look at that. Wow. Wow, I mean, talk again, so this is the, there's almost no lines painted on the figure, even on the face, right? The distinction between the bridge of the nose and the cheek is just done with a highlight, right? Just a little bit of a brighter color on the nose, and then this the blush on the cheek, right? Really nice, very subtle. Yeah, that's great. I wouldn't change a thing. I think it's beautiful. Yeah. In some paintings we're going to do in July and August, there's going to be a few paintings where we really look at drapery a little bit more, and I think that's really going to help a number of you really create even more believable folds and fabrics. Great job. Wow, and then here's Deborah. Deborah decided to focus on the face here, which I think is great. There was a few paintings where I thought, like, maybe we should just crop right in on that, and that looks great. What would I say? So I was talking about, like, the subtlety here on the nose. One thing, I get this feeling from this painting, it might be the placement of the nostrils. That the nose here appears to be kind of like this angle, maybe, kind of not quite straight on, but maybe a little bit off to the side. But the rest of her face is turned a little bit further, right? So the rest of her face is kind of like, I'm talking very, very minute technical kind of stuff. But what I would say, let's see if I, so right now we've got, maybe let's make this view where we see both of them side by side. So right now we've got kind of like this with this nose, right? Which makes it look like the nose is kind of pointing, not quite straight like this, but a little bit off. Whereas I think we want the nose to be a little bit further off to the side. So what I would expect is the nose to be kind of like this, and maybe that, right? Because we see this nostril here, and this nostril there. So it just makes this so can you see how there's just a small, very, very small change between those two things, which causes a slight confusion as to, or makes it look like she's moving a little bit, which is not necessarily a problem. There are artists like probably the Francis Bacon not the author from Shakespeare's contemporary, but Francis Bacon, the painter, who I think he died in mid-80s, 1980s. We will do a painting of his coming up, but he's very famous for having these faces where the face looks like it's moving and shifting. Or Picasso, right, where we see kind of multifaceted face, a cubist version where we're seeing multiple versions of the face at the same time. So it is not a huge problem. If I wanted to kind of, like, even you see how if I kind of cover over that nostril a little bit, I think it kind of helps a tiny bit. Anyway, I'm totally nitpicking here, but I'm just trying to, as much as possible, help. Now, this one here, I thought I mentioned, this is Heidi included this version of, now I think is there 2 versions of this that she may have done, so I'm not sure which one is which, or I would assume the darker one is the second one, right? Generally that people darken the painting as they paint on it, so this looks like the first version. That's the second version. So this is just another Amrita Sher-Gil painting, the turmeric grinders, and I love seeing when people get inspired by one of the artists that we've talked about and painted, and then go off, and we're going to see a few more versions of that where people are like, oh, wow, I'm so jazzed to have found this artist. I'm going to make a few more paintings by them. So this is really cool. I don't have any, what can I say about these? I love these paintings by Amrita Sher-Gil. Like, she did a number of these scenes that they almost feel like they might be based on photographs, like little snapshots that she took. Her father, by the way, was a photographer. I don't think he was like a professional exhibiting photographer, but took a lot of photographs, so it's possible that she might have been working from some of his photos. But they just have this look of like, you're walking by and you just see like a scene happening between the trees, and I go, oh, what's going on over there? They have that voyeuristic kind of quality. And I think those were in the paintings that she was making when she went back to India. And a lot of those paintings have that same look of particularly women who are working and doing things in small groups of with like all women doing things with other women. She's such an interesting artist. I'm sure probably I can't. I mean, she just like, I mean, obviously she's one of my favorite artists because we used her for one of our sessions and focused on her work. But I would just think in our lifetime we've got to see like a great film biography on her. She'd be well worth it. Okay, so let's go forward here. How about let's talk about polar bears next. Oops, that's interesting. It's added it right to this. Okay, so this is Elizabeth's version of the painting. Let me see, do I have the original? Oh yeah, so this was the original image that we made a painting from. And here is Elizabeth's. That is great. I love that. Wow, I love that glowing, warm color. It almost matches my shirt. Coming from like the deep down inside the under hide of the bear there. I think is super. Like, it just gives it that warmth and that glow coming from, which is all, it's in the original image, but I think the way that we painted it adds even more warmth to it. Yeah, I don't know, what can I say here? Yeah, it is great. I love the way, you know, the way that you painted it too also just gives it a really nice furry quality, these very small brushstrokes, and it's nice to see that juxtaposed with these larger brushstrokes in the background. Always thinking about, like, what are the different tools that we have as artists to create distinction between different objects and figures, like how to define a person from their clothes, you know, or a person from a background, or in case of this, a bear and a background. And there's so many different ways. Obviously, the things that come easiest to us are just color and then value, like light and dark, and how, so we can, you know, put a blue thing next to a red thing, and that immediately separates them. We can put a black thing next to a white thing, and that separates them. But things like texture, size of brush strokes, size of brush, you know, I mean, we can go on and on, can help create distinctions between different things, especially in a painting like this where the color is quite muted because there's a lot of white in the color, right? Even in this, the warmth inside, there's white mixed in, right? So when we have a painting that's predominantly white or blue, then you're kind of taking the whole color way of creating that separation out of the mix, and then you've got to go down the line and think, okay, well, what are other tools I have here to create those contrasts? Cool. Here's Gail's, I think, in the comments, says, I think my bear has scoliosis. That was kind of a funny comment. I like the way that I think this is a beautiful looking bear. My wife, when she saw even the one I did, was like, oh, these would make like a really good children's book, right? Even though we tried to paint this as a relatively representational painting, there is, I think, even in the original photo, something kind of comic about that bear standing on its hind legs and waving, because it just looks like a person standing there waving, or somebody in a costume waving, right? Really cool. It looks like you have tinted down the belly of the bear here by adding some white back over top of that color, which doesn't bother me. I think I could understand why you might feel compelled to do that, because I think even when I'm painting, I'm like, wow, that looks almost unnaturally orange, as opposed, but you know, it's like a lot of animals often have a different color on their belly and chest than they do on their backs and all that kind of stuff. Just like, you know, the palm of our hand versus the back of our hand. We can still see. I think if you wanted to do that, what I would say is maybe add a little bit of medium in it and make it just a little bit more transparent, I think. Because, I mean, I can still see some of that kind of showing through, but I think it would be nice to see just a little bit more. Because not only are these colors, or let me see if we go back to the original, this kind of thing that exists in actual nature, but it is one of the tools that we as artists have to create the distinction between, like, the top and bottom of, you know, a hand or a belly and all that kind of stuff. So I think you might want to keep a little bit of that if you were to do an image like this in the future. Speaking of which, like, here's Heidi, and that is gorgeous painting, Heidi. That is really nice. So you've really, like, gone the other way, doubled down on the warmth of the underside of the bear here, and it is very effective. Like, we can now see you know, like the top of its head and this side here. And I know that there's, you know, going to be some reflected light from around the bear, giving it that glow. But it does, you know, especially when we see this arm crossing over its body, we see how the contrast between its arm and its belly, or even the head and the chin down here. Really nice. I really like the way that you did the face on that bear. Very impressed, Heidi. And it is nice too, like this much warmer water right in front here versus all the cold gray as we go further back in space. I like that. This one turned out really nice for you, Heidi. Let's see. We had May here. Oh, cool. Hey, wow, you did a great job on that paw, particularly. Everything else here is fantastic, similar to what we were just talking about. I kind of gravitate towards this paw of the bear. And even down here, this is really nice. So this is just like exactly what I was talking about with Gale, right? With this little bit opaque layering on the belly. Like we have a little bit of it here. I kind of would like to see a little bit more, maybe almost the way that May has approached it. Like I think maybe, I can't remember how I painted this painting, so I don't know if these are things I mentioned in the original video, but it might look like May might have had the same kind of feeling, like, oh, I don't know, it looks a little cartoony when it's so orange. So she went, and it looks like applied a little bit of medium and just tinted this down a little bit, so it's not quite so intense, even up in here. And I think that it worked really well. Wow, that's great. Really nice. Wow, you guys. Wow, and then here's Susan. I think this is the last polar bear of the we'll look at. That's great. Very different, right? Like, talk about, I just think it's so neat to see all of these side by side and seeing all the different approaches. Like, we're all painting from the same image. Most of us are using the outlines, and so that we're literally painting almost the identical drawing and painting over top of it, and yet the different approaches people are taking here is so fascinating. I feel like this is a little bit closer to the way that, because I was painting mine, I think, relatively quickly. So there's an immediacy of the brush strokes that you're painting in here. It looks really fantastic. Yeah, I don't know, what else could I say here? I don't think I need to say anything more. I mean, it's so cool to see all of these different, even if you're just like looking at the faces of these bears, like, do they not all have slightly different personalities? So here's Elizabeth's, Gale's, Heidi's, May's, and Susan's. They're fantastic. That's great. Well done, you guys. Okay. So let's move to the A.Y. Jackson here. Speaking of Group of Seven, and A.Y. Jackson was a member of the Group of Seven. Basically the founder of the Group of Seven, like really the main engine behind that movement. He was one of those guys that is always organizing people. Every group of friends needs somebody like an A.Y. Jackson who's getting people together. Anyway, so that's the original that we painted. Let's see, which way should we? Let's go up this. So here's Deborah's version. Ah. Wow. Interesting. Let's was gonna say, it almost looks a little bit like a watercolor approach on here, but I do think it's on canvas, I think. Really nice. I really like the way that you did the sky. Oops. The sky, there's a really nice softness to those clouds. I think the way that I did the sky was very stylized, and some very distinct line work in the clouds, which is a lot more like the way my own personal style. So here you've kind of actually gone, and his, I guess, too, is very stylized, lots of lines and stuff in there. Whereas you chose to soften that up quite a lot, which I think actually works really well, because it creates it helps really push those clouds further into the background, I guess. And then, so it creates, again, a distinction between the background and then the middle ground, which has a little bit more solidity to it. Then obviously the trees are outlined, they feel like quite solid. And then when we come to these trenches, we can really see the trench. That's really cool. Great job. I like this one a lot. I think you did a great job here, Deborah. Oh, Deborah says, I did it on paper with acrylics. Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Just the way that there is a look of that acrylic has on paper versus canvas. Like some of these brushstrokes just have a smoothness that you don't often see with canvas, unless it's like really gessoed and sanded down quite a lot. Wow, look at that, Elizabeth. Look at all of these colors. Love all of this pink up there. Woo, that is gorgeous. So, like, totally the opposite, approach that Deborah did, right? Whereas we see the sky is these clouds are heavy and they're dark and there's outlines and lines all over them, which is, that's just a stylistic thing, right? I really think, like, there's no right or wrong way to do any kind of art. It just really comes down to, like, what do you want to communicate, and what do you like better? What feels most natural to you? What brings you the most joy? And then thinking of, like, how can I, once I start seeing my own style starting to kind of seep out, right? Then thinking, what is the most, like, how can I use my style effectively to communicate what I want to say? That's the next thing. It's sort of like a person's way of talking, and like, an example might be like an actor, right? Like, certain actors have, we can do impressions of them. We can pretend we're Robert De Niro, or Betty Davis, or just by changing our voice and then maybe doing some mannerisms or whatever. But obviously, casting directors and directors will make, I'm sure everybody would love to work with Robert De Niro, or I don't know, Jennifer Aniston or whatever, right? But it wouldn't make sense to have them in every single possible role, right? So they like, wow, I'd really love to have De Niro in my movie, but having him play a 18-year-old ice cream salesman just doesn't make sense. So I have to find somebody else who'd be more appropriate for that role or that story, right? And it's the same sort of thing when it comes to our painting style, and then kind of trying to, like, what is the best style for, or how can I use my style to convey my ideas better, I guess is the question. Anyway, great work here, Elizabeth. I think this is really nice. I don't have anything else to say about that one. I think it's beautiful. Great job. Wow, Gail, like, what? These are all so very different. Isn't it so interesting, like how different these paintings are? Wow. That and it's and also how they all approach like the trenches, and you know, I think one of the features of the original painting by A.Y. Jackson is that it doesn't necessarily, if you didn't know that this was a landscape that had been altered by war, by bombs and cannon fire and all that kind of stuff, like you wouldn't necessarily you wouldn't think it, right? Like, and I think that's an important part of these paintings. Like the one thing you do see is maybe it's like, oh, these trees look a little odd. Like, how come there's no branches on these? Why aren't there any leaves? Like, I can understand, you know, the difference between fall and summer, and maybe, you know, all the leaves fall off, but these trees just like stumps. Like, what's going on there, right? Like, World War I. Like, if you see the photos of trees that are just shredded down to the, you know, you know, they all just look like telephone posts, right? Because all the tree branches have been blown off. That's great. Could I say anything about that? No, I don't. I think that's good. Yeah. Let's keep on going. Wow. Here's another one. Heidi. Wow. I think you did a great job. This is what maybe is close to his way of approaching the clouds, I think, that we've seen so far. I think that's really effective. And you know, again, like your painting style here, like these very like circular, like I get the feeling like you're painting with a particular kind of a brush that's, you're getting a lot of like little dry brush kind of things going on in here, and these circular kind of almost pointillist kind of marks. Really interesting. Very cool. Looks great. I love how organic these trees are. Like, you've given them, they you know what they kind of remind me of is, you know, those like windsocks that blow around in front of car dealerships. I mean, I hope I haven't, by putting that on there, changed the way you see this painting. But it just, there's in some way you've kind of like rescued those trees from being these kind of sad, broken down things to like they're waving around and they've got energy again. So you've kind of recuperated the nature in there from the war. Very interesting. Okay, here's Laurie's version of this paint. So this is the first step 1, and then this is step 2, and then here's step 3. I love that you sent in multiple versions of it. So we can really see how you approached this painting. And how different it changed, right? Because you could see how you're working on the sky, and it looks like you spent a lot of time there on the sky, and then you did even more work, and then you kind of worked a lot of that out and softened it up quite dramatically, almost exactly like was it Deborah's right at the very beginning, right? So we have, by the time we get down there, we've got this very soft background, right? And we can see, you know, the difference between the way, let's say, your trees versus we were just talking about Heidi's. These are kind of much more kind of Emily Carr-ish kind of trees, right? Versus these have a bit more of a weathered, broken, like they've been stripped of the branches and leaves. It's a different mood created in all of these paintings. And I have no judgment either way. It doesn't. I love looking at art and just assuming they're done exactly the way they were intended to be done. And it makes it so much more interesting and fulfilling to look at art that way. Obviously, then I have to put my teacher's hat back on and think, okay, like what if I was a student, what kind of feedback would I want to help with this to make it even better if it can be made better. Interesting. Very cool. I love I love the sky. I love these colors you put in there. I would say, I mean, you're following my lead. Almost these dark lines though in the sky, to me they kind of look almost like leaves that are blowing off of the trees and they're caught up in the wind. That's what my initial thought of these are, and maybe that's the way mine looked like, I can't remember, but so I could see a little bit of softening in the same, like kind of getting a little back to where Lori and Deborah were, but it doesn't bother me. I do think the trenches down here, there's a flatness to this area where I think it doesn't appear to me to be coming towards us as much as it sort of seems to be kind of going down, and I kind of would like to see it kind of come up. And I think part of why that's happening is we've got a lot these areas up here as like, so again, we want to think of like your foreground closest to you, your middle ground, and your background, right? So obviously the sky in the background is the background. These trees and the road and buildings is in the middle ground, and then this is our foreground. And what often happens is a lot of times people put like a lot of dark, fully outlined things in the middle ground, and in the foreground, you know, it kind of it causes a little bit of a problem because you know, generally when we're looking with our eyes, the things that are closest to us and in front of us have the most detail and have the most contrast, because and the most saturated color, because as things go further backwards in space, there's air molecules which diffuse and refract the light, so things start getting more and more white into the paint, and it appears like they get a little bit foggy, especially if things way far in the distance. Now, what I would say is oops, where did that go? Is to kind of give the foreground more weight, is we want to see, I think, something darker and heavier here. So I like this dark line here, but I think it almost to me makes this look like, you know, a cross section like of an anthill, and we're going underground, and this is like maybe a bunny rabbit's, what do they call those, a hovel or something, you know, like these tunnels underground, as opposed to things stretching out towards us and going, you know, by our sides. It appears like we've cut the ground down, we're looking through the ground. So what I would suggest is we want some of this darker color closer to the foreground, and then softening up some of this dark area so we don't even have these really dark lines there. I think that would help a little bit, if that is and yeah. And anytime you have like a line like this, you probably want to think of it getting wider as it gets closer to you, right? Just like train tracks, right? Train tracks start, you know, if this is in the background, they come here and then they appear to kind of go, so they would widen out. So I would think like this would widen a little bit. Same, I mean, obviously what's happening with the trench. So it's, you know, we see here, this is, oh yeah, this is going back to Lori's here, like, so this area here is obviously, it's darker, but these darker lines start coming in and around here. It's, I mean, that's super tricky. Wow, and then here's Richard's. Whoa, look at that. Totally different painting again. So really nice, like this darkness, and you know, and obviously he's got this dark line that goes over here, but we really feel the trench kind of coming and widening and widening and widening as it kind of passes to our left here. Whereas it looks like, yeah, maze here just needs to widen a little bit. Man, it's tricky. And, as I said, there's also things that some of us are better at painting than other people. And some people are really amazing at landscapes, some people are really amazing at portraits, and some people are really amazing at painting buildings. Like Tom Thompson, who we'll talk about in a few weeks. He obviously is really one of the best artists in Canadian history. Amazing landscape painter, like one of the best in human history. Not very good at painting people. That's just, every painting he did of people are pretty awkward, right? So, it's just like Michael Jordan, like the best basketball player of all time. He took a few years off to try baseball. Not a very good baseball player, right? So you could be the greatest basketball player of all time, but maybe not a really good baseball player. So just but at the same time, it's not like you can't get better at something. And sometimes these things can be very simple fixes. I love this. This is great, Richard. I don't think I have anything I want to add to this. It is, I just wonder if we look at the original here, that's what the original looked like, and then your version of it is actually very different. But I gotta say, I kind of like yours, maybe even in many ways more than his. Like the way that you've defined certain things in this painting. In his painting, there's a lot. It's very confused. Like you've added a lot of clarity to this painting, even in this middle ground and background, this hill. I love the way you painted this in this kind of darker area here. Wow, great job, Richard. Let's see here. Okay, I gotta dilly-daddling. I gotta move a little faster. Shelley here. Very cool. I love the sky. I love the clouds. Wow, it's also interesting the way this painting also makes me feel like in some of the other ones, it's almost like I'm quite low to the ground and looking maybe over the trenches at other things in front of me, whereas this one I feel like I'm standing up a little bit higher. Okay, so there's two. Are there two versions of this? I'm not sure. Why do I have two of them? Let's just keep this one up there. I'm not sure what. Interesting. I love all the colors in here. I love this purple. It looks like you made your dark color with your colors rather than going to black, which I think is really nice, right? Because now all of the different levels of all the values are all based on color rather than just black and white. So I love seeing the purple in the shadows. I think that's really nice. And the way it almost looks like you're painting this again, like on a piece of paper or a canvas, like a panel or something. A very smooth application of paint. Looks really good. I like that. That's really nice. That's a great painting. Whoa! And then here's Susan's. That is great. Wow. So I mean, like all of the paintings we've looked at, let's just take a quick second, are so different from one another. Huh. That's crazy. So here's the original. And the more I look at your guys' paintings, the more I'm like, I think I like all of your versions better than the original, which is an amazing thing to say about one of the best artists in Canadian history. If you guys are really giving him a run for his money there, Huh. That is interesting. I mean, this does look a lot more like my own personal style. That doesn't mean I like it better than anybody else's, but this is sort of a lot more like how I paint kind of clouds, and with this kind of line work inside here. I do suspect that maybe just the photo has a little bit more blue in it. Let's just see, or the lighting has given it a bit of a blue cast. Let's see. This would be probably if we light. I think that's probably closer to what the original, what you're painting when you paint it looks like. I just warmed it up, added a little bit more warmth to the color. Yeah, this is really cool. One thing I would say is, you know, this middle ground towards the background, that back hill, I would probably have it just a little more white and tinting them a little bit more, just to give it a little bit more separation between that and the foreground. Tiny little detail. Otherwise, it's really fantastic. I also really like this purple and red inside of here. Just the, I know it's like I'm sure I'm a broken record, but when we have color in the shadows, it just makes the shadows come alive. I think one of the things that is a common, I don't know, it was a mistake, but it's just something a lot of beginner artists often do, is when they have a shadow, is just slap black right on top of it. And shadows are such like interesting, you know, they account for, you know, what, 50% of the world around us, right? And shadows tell us so much about shape. And often it's kind of a missed opportunity. So I really like seeing that. That's just, it makes it look like there's lots of life down there. And there's light in the shadows, right? You know, there's light underneath my hand right now. I mean, there's light and life even in the shadow, right? Great job, everybody. Wow. Okay. Where should we move on to? I don't know if anyone said we did the turtles already, so let's look at some turtles. And if we did the turtles already, and maybe it'll come to mind as we're going through. I'll be like, does this sound really familiar to anybody? So if we talked about the turtles in the last episode, let me know in the comments. The sooner the better. I don't think, yeah. But let me see. Do I have the original in here? So here's the original photograph we're working from. I remember doing this painting, and I can't remember who it was in the chat, was like, Michael, you've been painting the background for like an hour and a half or whatever. Like, maybe we should move. Which I totally appreciate. I love that. I thought that was quite funny, actually. Because sometimes I do get... I'll sometimes just get way too focused on a certain aspect of the painting, and if I was walking around the classroom and I saw somebody spending that long on, you know, if we're thinking this painting is going to take us 3 hours and somebody's spending an hour and a half on this one little area, I'd be like, okay, maybe we should move on a little bit. Joshua says, yeah, I don't think you covered the sea turtles yet. Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you, Joshua. So yeah, I remember that was kind of this was a little bit of a tricky painting for sure. I remember when I was painting it thinking like, whoo, like oh my goodness, this was a little trickier than I thought, which is you know, surprising how these turned out so well considering all of that. So let's here's Vanya's version of the painting. Now we've got this glare on here. It obscures a bit of the bottom here, but I think you did a fantastic job on this painting. Gorgeous. I love the white these really nice outlining on this painting. That white really helps make the turtle pop, and the underneath here is really well done. That is really nice. You did a great job here, Vanya. Love that. I don't have anything else to say. It's a little hard because of the photograph being a little bit bright, but I think from what I see, you nailed this painting really, really well. Here's Susan's version. Ooh, I like this. Wow. Okay, so what I see here, it looks like a little bit of outlining with some white around these shapes to kind of help separate them from the background. And that was, partly my own kind of fault. I think because I might have darkened the I don't know what this would be, like the coral or rock formation in the background a little bit too much. So that, I think a few people did some outlining like that. But it does work. I think the only thing I would suggest is trying to kind of blend that in, because otherwise outlining can't kind of look, especially if we're trying to make something look photorealistic or try to make it look like the photograph, it can kind of pull it a little back towards the more cartoon-like side of things. Not that I have anything against cartoons. I'm not using cartoon as an pejorative term. I just mean it is not something we generally see in nature, right? I mean, obviously there are, things are backlit and everything, but overall, I think it's turned out really nice. Again, this was a tricky painting, and if this would be one of those paintings I would consider redoing, like filming it a second time, knowing everything I did in the first time. Because, it's, in so many ways, it's way easier to make a painting of the make a reproduction of the Mona Lisa than it is just to make a painting of your friend. Taking a photograph from their Facebook page and then you make a painting of it. I think it's more difficult to do that than it is to make a reproduction of Leonardo's Mona Lisa, because Leonardo already, he's sort of like, by looking at the painting, we have kind of like the cheat sheet on how to make that painting, because it's all there in front of us. When we're painting something from a photograph, we have to kind of break it down ourselves and try to figure out a process to make that paint, to turn that photograph into a painting. And there's been times where I've done it really, really well, and I'm like, wow, that's great. I feel really happy with the way that I solved this challenge or problem, right? And there's definitely other ones where, like this one, where I'm like, I think I figured it out by the end, but if I was to start it over, I would do a much better job. Which is also a good thing to remember, is that often, that's the way a lot of artists work. And when we talk about James Gurney on Tuesday, he often does these very small little illustrations first to kind of solve many of the problems, and then does a kind of a second, larger version of the painting, having figured out some of those problems in the smaller thumbnail painting. Maybe we should even do that. Think about that. Maybe we'll. Okay, I'll have to. Wow, here's Shelley's version. I think Shelley was like, oh, yeah, here it is. Posted this photo to the Facebook page as the original, as a suggestion of what to do for Paint the News. And then I was like, oh, I couldn't find one that I wanted to find an image that was copyright free that we could use, so I wouldn't get my video taken down or sued or anything. But so as artists, so you can certainly use any image you like and paint whatever you like. It's it's only when you start putting things up on YouTube or whatever where somebody can give you a copyright strike that you have to worry about. But anyway, that is so cool. It's so interesting to see them side by side like that. And then this one looks a little bit out of focus, actually. I feel like I could see this one better here. Really nice job. I think you did a great... You know what's interesting is even this little bit of a dry brush that I see here, that looks... It has like a very watery quality. Like this is what... Is this watercolor? Yeah, watercolor paper it looks like. And then you've allowed the water to kind of blend and mix a bit up here, which really gives us the feeling of the surface of the water where it meets the air. Really nice work down here. This is a great job, Shelley. I'm really impressed. You know, painting water and things underwater is like really tricky, because one of the like amazing things with water is the way that it interacts with light, and how light can, you know, it kind of bounces around through the different particles of water and can illuminate something from below as well, right? So, you know, it can make it kind of like, otherwise if somebody is just walking down the street and the sun is right above them, it's the light, you know, underneath their arms is going to be mostly dark. There might be a little bit of light reflecting off the grass and the sidewalk and their jeans or whatever, but for the most part it's going to be darker under here than it is on top. When we're in the water, however, especially if your feet are on the sand, right, the light is coming down, going through the water, bouncing off water from all different directions, bouncing off the ground, coming back up under. In some cases, it can be almost as bright, or sometimes it can even be brighter than the light on top, right? So for painters, it poses lots of problems. And I'm not saying I got all the solutions for that. But it often means, rather than modifying the color with value by adding black, white, and gray, is changing the colors and modifying warm and cool colors for top and bottom, and alternating those, juxtaposing just reds and blues or something like that. So it just requires really looking carefully at things. Wow. Very cool, Paula. I love that you sort of took this one turtle that we were doing, and then you added a little friend here, or a baby turtle underneath. That's cool. And the watercolor looks great. Great solution for this particular challenge. What I like, and I see and this is a challenge when it comes to watercolor, is see this like kind of nice yellow kind of shining through in a few places. I think this particular painting, you almost want a little bit more of that happening, a little bit more. And obviously it's easy to, like, that's the thing with watercolor. If you go too far, you're kind of too far, and you got to kind of, I guess you can put some acrylic, you could put white on it and then paint over top of that, but it's pretty tricky and it kind of calls attention to itself, so you almost have to redo it. But just like what I was talking about, that reflected light from below, that was one of the challenges with this painting. Like you can see, here's the original, how we have this really nice lemon green, almost neon reflection underneath the turtle. Okay, let's keep on plowing ahead here, because I want to get through maybe 3 or 4 more paintings before we wind up for today. So, this is great, May. Wow. Really nice. You know, one of the things I see in your painting, and I think we've seen a few others, is just this, like, bit of a halo effect around the figure and the background. It's like, ideally, this crack in the bottom here would kind of just continue up through here. So that's tricky to do. Like you see, we don't see like a halo around here. It wouldn't be too hard to just kind of go in here and do a little bit of extra work on the background itself. That's one of the reasons why I spent a while on my background and trying to get this right, so that it could also be pushed a little bit further back and wouldn't have any confusion between this rock formation and the turtle itself. I actually really like the way you've done the face here, and the way that you've painted all of the texture I think is gorgeous. I think this color that you've got here, I think we want just more of that elsewhere, that lime green. I'm just going to keep on pushing forward here. Here's May's painting. I think this is, these are, my nieces did these paintings. One's only 5 years old, I think one was even younger. That makes me so excited that you've got family members who are inspired by your artwork, who are painting along or drawing with you. That is so cool. It makes me so excited. Wow, they must be so excited to have an aunt who is so creative, right? And every time they can come and see all the art that you've made. Great job, May. Heidi here. How many we got? 1, 2, 3, 5 more turtles before we move on. That's great. This is a really nice job, Heidi. Great underbelly. Oops. There we go. Yeah, I don't know. Not much I can say about this. Again, I can't remember how I did mine, but even just softening up this edge would be nice. So that might mean bringing a little bit of this color over top of this, doing a little glaze or something. But otherwise, I mean, this is actually really nice. The way you've done this kind of starburst pattern on the top of the shell, great, really, really nice. I don't have anything to say about that. Wow, Eleanor, that is cool. I think so. This is sort of the opposite thing that I was saying about almost everyone else's work. In this instance, you've got a great job here. I think what we need is we want a little bit more contrast on here. We need to, I think, darken a few things on this turtle a little bit. And I think partly, and this is again going back to, I'm responsible for all this. I'm the one who's showing you guys what to do. But this, I feel like this shape is itself too dark. And I think that might have caused you to be a little bit anxious about darkening your turtle as well, because you didn't want there to be a confusion between the turtle and the background. So I think that's why when I'm painting, I often do some work on the background, then move to the foreground, and then move back to the background and finish that, and then finish with the foreground. I might even do a couple more, just so that I don't make the background or middle ground too dark, and then I'm like, oh, now I can't make my foreground any darker, so now what, I have to go back and lighten the background. So I always tend to kind of build things up so that I can kind of see before I make something too dark, and then I have to add it, which is because it's always easier to darken something than it is to lighten something. You can lighten it, but often it means you're adding white to that thing, which takes away saturation and makes it just, makes things look lighter and more pastel-y, so you often lose the saturation of the color. I mean, otherwise it's fantastic. I don't mean to be picking on anybody. I mean, these are so amazing. Great job. So this is what I was talking about. Really nice contrast here inside the turtle. I think actually, if anything, Dolores, what I would say is having a little bit more of that, of the reflected light, a little bit more of that orange in here. But I mean, I mean, small details here. Otherwise, it looks really, really nice. Great job. Really nice. And here's Deborah. So that's Dolores, and here's Deborah. Yeah. Great job. Yeah. So here, this rock formation is definitely much lighter, so you can get really nice and dark on this turtle. That's also really, really gorgeous. Really nice. Wow. These are beautiful. And then here's Christine's. I feel like this, let's just see if we can brighten that up. I feel like it's not. Got a lot of bright light coming in from behind here. So let's brighten up these shadows. I'm not exactly sure if that's how it looks, but I feel like we're closer than we were before. That is really cool. Actually did a really nice job. I love the patterning on here. The one thing I would say is there is a bit of a confusion as to which flipper is in front. Is this the one that's closest to us, or is this the one closest to us? And there's a few things that we could do to change that. One of which would be just to make this flipper here really obviously overlap the other one. I can't even remember what the original photo looked like. Yeah, like, so you see here underneath we have like the chest or belly of the turtle, and overlaps this flipper here, pushing this flipper backwards in space. So for this one, I think having that belly come up and over would instantly and immediately push that one flipper backwards. So we're not kind of wondering, does it have another, or both flippers on one side? Also, like the I love the way that, like, the color and the application of the paint is gorgeous on the tiles on the back of the turtle. One thing is that it does look a little flat, so I think we want to kind of encourage the curving of these lines to go around the shape. So we might have less. It's tricky even here, like this grid that you've put on the belly. I think we want these all to be kind of curving lines. So just as a quick, if I was, let me bring both of them up on the screen so you just can see. Currently we have something this. Right, so my suggestion would be just to do, let's say we take this shell, you know, we would have one flipper like this. This is the belly. We have that flipper and then this one, right? So that this one comes definitely in front, and then this one in behind, right? So we have overlapping shapes, and then with the belly having curved lines like that to kind of, so that it looks like we're going curving up, and that those lines are just going to bend around, right? And same sort of thing if you imagine just carrying these lines around, right? So we would have these shapes kind of fitting inside, right? And then, does that make sense? Because right now these sort of look flat, so instead of having a grid like that, we have that make sense? Again, some of this is stuff that I covered in my drawing class, and I don't obviously this is a painting class, and so I don't expect anyone to know much of anything about how to draw, right? And I provide you the template so you can kind of copy the template, and that kind of should help with a little bit of the heavy lifting when it comes to getting the form just drawn on the page. So anyway, let's push on here. Let's talk about, I think we got a lot of Robert Bateman here. So that's Deborah's. How did we were going? Yeah, so let's start with alphabetical. Okay, so actually this Deborah did her own version, so maybe we'll come back to that. Here, this is Eleanor's painting. Do I have the original still in here somewhere? Yeah. So here's the original Robert Bateman painting. I mean, gorgeous. I'm a huge Robert Bateman fan, obviously. That's why I made a Robert Bateman painting. And this, I think this was actually a pretty good painting for us to work on because of how relatively simple it is. I know some of you are like, what? But this is really one of the few paintings he's done of any animal that has essentially a flat background or no background, right? So it makes it a lot easier for us when we don't have to also paint trees and mountains and maybe other birds, etc., right? So, so let's take a look. Here's Eleanor's version. That is actually gorgeous, Eleanor. Really nice, beautiful, beautiful plumage, yeah, as Monty Python would say. That is, yeah, great. What could I say here? Maybe what I would say is some of these lines on the beak might be a little bit too dark. I would consider, because I don't know if this is black or like a really dark gray. It might even have been a color that we mixed, you know, a dark color that we mixed. I just feel like it's a little bit heavy and it looks slightly cartoony. Not, again, I have nothing against, we've painted our most recent, one of our most recent paintings, was it Superman was the most recent? I can't remember. So obviously I love comics and cartoons. I'm drawing a comic that's like my life right now is all comics. But it does often, it can counteract the realism of things because we don't really see outlines and lines in nature itself. So I would just kind of lighten that up a little bit. I love the eye, a beautiful, beautiful reflection. Like, does that not look like a glassy eye? Like it's a watery, reflective shape versus no reflections elsewhere because feathers aren't going to reflect light in the same way that a glass or water or an eyeball might, right? So really nice job with that eye. I love the kind of the angry eyebrow on there. It's great. Oops. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Go back here. Yeah, I think I don't know anything else I would say too much on that. That looks great. The background, actually, you did kind of there is a little bit of variety in the background, which I like. There's a little bit of that extra texture in there. I think it's worked out really well. Wow, look at that, Elizabeth. Wow, that turned out great. It's funny, like you've given all these little tiny feathers kind of. This reminds me of like a little, it was like little baby chickadees or whatever, little baby birds. How they just seem like fluffy all over the place, kind of like, you know, when our daughter was born and her hair was very, very short, and she looked really fluffy. It kind of reminds me of this. I would, and I can't. I mean, let's go back to the original. You could see that he does. There is a little bit of fluffiness on these edges, but there are places where it is a bit smoother. So, I mean, this is super nitpicky, but I'm just would say that maybe we've got a little too fluffy, because it does either make this eagle look very young, or in the opposite kind of like it's pretty haggard and it's been fighting off all of the other, it's been cast out of the flock or something. Do eagles are pretty solitary, aren't they? They don't really flock or like other birds. I don't think. I could be totally wrong. But this eagle does have a lot of personality, which I think is one of the fun things, is when you can inject personality into an animal, it really takes a portrait of an animal to the next level, right? Because as people, we tend to kind of imbue everything with human-like characteristics. And so we will kind of do it anyway, but if you as the artist do things to give an animal already, so then not only, because people are going to do it anyway, as an artist, if you can use some little tricks that we have as artists to do it, then you can kind of control the personality that people gather from your painting. So they don't go, so that you don't have 10 people saying from like, oh, I think it's a happy bird. Oh, no, this is an angry bird or a sad bird or whatever. You're like, oh no, I'm making this an incurious bird or a mischievous bird, all those sort of things. So then you can really control the narrative, I guess, right? Yeah, there's something about this one. I think it might be this kind of big eye and a little bit of the hairiness. I think, you know, makes it look like, you know, like an 80-year-old man who hasn't shaved in a few weeks or something, right? Not quite a beard, but just that, like, you know, kind of retired, and I'm just taking it easy kind of thing. Kind of thinking of my dad when I think of that, right? Wow, it's totally different here. Look at here. This is Heidi's version of the painting. Very interesting. So, I mean, especially considering the last painting we looked at. Wow. So I love the way that you've painted this. It's very thin application of paint, right? We can still see that yellow all the way through the bottom. Like, this is very dry brush through a lot of such an interesting way of applying paint to this painting. This is great, Heidi. Like, not what I would have expected, and certainly a little bit different than as I was demonstrating. But this is brilliant. Like, this makes me excited because I feel like your style is really starting to shine through here, because you've made some very deliberate, clear choices here to paint it like that. So that's really very interesting. How do I feel about that big dark line coming through here? I don't know if that was from underneath before you painted that blue and you've left it there, or you subsequently outlined it. And maybe you did that because you felt like it needed it. It is really strong, and it's only on the beak. Like, I feel like I don't mind it, but I feel like I'd want to see maybe a little bit more of it here, and less of it here, because it makes me feel like it has some relationship to the sun or the light. Very interesting, very weird, very strange. The one thing I would say, I find this a little bit distracting. There's a little bit of flatness, and we've seen this in a number of other birds that we've looked at already. This here, you know, again, it's similar to what we were talking about, right? Like, we have this eagle. I'll just very quickly, and then if this is the shoulder and we put all of these things side by side, it just, again, it looks a lot more like this. However, if we think of that shoulder as having, like, as like having curves on it, right? And that therefore we might have, you know, some of these kind of just disappear. Right? Does that make any sense? Like, because right now this to me looks, and you're not the only one, almost everyone so far, maybe in the way that I painted it, looks like that, but it is flattening the shoulder of the bird. I think we want to see a little bit more roundness, and that comes with some of these feathers just sort of disappearing around the edge, and as they get closer to the middle, getting bigger, and then disappearing again. Right? Like, I think I see like that kind of thing around the edge here. Like, here, let's get a new piece of paper. Right, so as opposed to having all these things, just instead we might see something like so, just like more variety in them, right? And that they start, so let's say we put these ones in the center, and then everything else is sort of being overlapped and moving, you know, like back towards, I don't know if I'm doing the best job of explaining it, but that kind of thing is just a subtle, like, in fact, if we look at the original, how did he do that? Yeah, okay, so you can see the way that he's got this happening. You see kind of the way that everything kind of overlaps to create that dimension. That's what we'd want, a little bit more of that. And maybe that could entirely be my fault, that I might have taught it that way. Sometimes when I'm just moving so quickly, I'm moving faster than my brain can think. So, I mean, otherwise it's really beautiful. I mean, what you've done here on the face is exquisite, right? And, you know, especially because it also looks like it's done very quickly and with relatively few layers of paint. And so to be able to communicate all of that with like a relatively dry brush and with maybe like 50 brush strokes is fantastic. That's great. Wow, here's less. Very cool. Huh. Very different too. Totally different. It's interesting you reserved some of this detail just for down here. Up here, it's much less, it's a little bit smoother. I get why you did that. I still think we would want a little bit of, of this really beautiful, actually quite fine, nice mark making down there. because you know there are feathers on the top of its head as well, right? So it kind of makes this look almost a little bit too smooth. Like, I think just a few little dashes here and there. Like, you don't have to fill it up as dense as this, because I get it that this is supposed to be the shadow, and so therefore we're going to see more of that definition in the shadow. I think we just want a little, like right, a little bit here and there. I think would be nice. Otherwise, I think it looks great. I think the same sort of thing I think everybody we've talked about has that same sort of thing with the feathers on the shoulders. So it's wow. Here's May's version again. Beautiful. Wow, good job, May. So this is an example, like, May, I often see in your paintings lots of texture. This is a great use of the texture to really, like, so here we don't see, like when we were talking about Les and those little tiny marks that show like the hairs of the feathers, we don't see that anywhere up here, but we do see the texture of your brush strokes, which suggest little feathers. Right, so like if we're looking at Les, this is very smooth, where I think we want to see kind of like the same texture. Like, you could do the same thing that May's done here and just add little white texture pieces in there that would make us think, oh, okay, there's more feathers up there. That's great. Really nice. The eye's done really well too. Could I say? I think that's great. Yeah, I don't know anything else I want to say on that. Looks great. Here's Paula's version. I think she's done a few. Did 2 eagles here. Interesting. Huh. I don't know which one I prefer. I think. Which one do I prefer? I mean, they're both very different. This one obviously has way more paint on it and way more texture on it, and it looks like this is actually done on canvas, whereas this is done on paper. So 2 different paintings by Paula here. What is nice about this one is there's like just the relative simplicities in same kind of like Heidi's also. Is that you've really got just a few colors and layers here, and you're able to really convincingly portray this eagle. I like the he's kind of an angry eagle, right? Versus this one looks like there's a lot more work on there, almost like, you know, I think sometimes people think like things get better if we work on it longer, and art is one of those funny things where sometimes less is more, but sometimes you have to do the longer painting in order to figure out what is unnecessary, right? I don't know which one you did first or second. It is so interesting to see them side by side. I think ultimately this one is the more successful one. Because just the immediacy and speed and the confidence those brush strokes are placed here, where it seems like a lot more overworking happening in these places here. Let's see. Here's, wow, look at that, Shelley. My goodness. Okay, wow. First of all, the background is really nice. Like, I mean, this is the original Robert Bateman, right? And it's just a boring, plain background. Yours, and I don't know if this is just, looks like this is done on paper, so the paper is a little bit warped. But it does seem like there is a little bit more variety of just some slight modulations in the color and value in the background that give it an extra little bit, like it suggests that there's something else there. It could just be the folds and the wrinkles in the paper that are making me think that. But so that's nice. The detail you put in the face, these very, like, again, when we were talking about like less. Like, you did a fantastic job up here, and just adding a little bit more up in the hair here. I think that's sort of one of the things that Shelley's done a really nice job of. We see all of this really nice detail down here and here, but it's just these little extra little tiny pieces. You don't need many more of them. That's what I'm saying. It just helps us know that that's the same surface that carries on across. Really great job. Another thing, this is something a few other people could also learn from, is see how, oops, Shelley's got this line on the beak comes up and just continues, but it curves as it goes around the beak, right? If we think about this same sort of thing, like a number of people did the beak, let's say this, and have whatever like this, right? So again, this just flattening the beak, whereas let's say Shelley's got this kind of thing, and it curves around. It's just this, the little difference between the line going up and then curving around the shape, right? Because we want to think of it as curving like that versus going straight like that. One flattens the form, whereas the other one curves around the form. Really cool. Great job, Shelley. Gorgeous job. And, you know, but at the same time, I think there's some work that could be done on the feathers here. And so it's you know, there's pros, like some strengths to every single different artwork we've seen here. Some people nailed different aspects of it and then had certain areas that could use a little improvement. So, you know, we can all, I mean, we're studying from the greatest artists that ever lived, right? So it's always, there's always going to be things that we can improve on. And I'm sure, you know, Robert Bateman, you know, this is a painting from 1983, when he was, you know, he was a big star in just coming into his like full powers at that point. But I'm sure, you know, having spoken to him before, I'm sure he would probably say, you know, I probably could, if I painted that painting today, I'm sure I could do a much better job. And you're like, what? And you're like, yeah, it was some of the, like, all artists have that feeling, right? Like, there's paintings I look at that I know that are on walls and, you know, boardrooms and stuff, and I now look at pictures sometimes when I'm doing talks at, you know, different schools and stuff, and I show them, and as I'm talking about, I'm like, oh, there's some things I would definitely change. But, you know, people bought them, and if I was to go in there and start painting over, they'd be furious at me. It's like, no, we bought it because we liked it. We don't want you to change anything in it, right? So let's move on here. This is Sue's version. That is cool, Sue. I actually really like the way that these feathers here have been done. So we see a lot more of less flat patterning of these feathers, and also the way that there's a little bit of transparency here, the brown, or the yellow ground that's coming through the brown. What is that? It makes me think of some kind of a chocolate, or a candy, like caramel or something. I don't know what it is, but it's making me like look around here for something to snack on. That's really nice, and just a juiciness there that looks really great. I love the way you did the face. You know, beautiful, lovely textures up here. Really great. Really nice, and even that little extra tiny curve up here is also really helpful. Great job. And wow, Susan, look at that. So interesting, right? Like, talk about the difference between, you know, everyone's approaches here, right? Susan and Shelley and Sue, right? Just, I mean, just for three people right at the end here. So, you know, like totally different application of paint. I mean, So in here we don't have those tiny little mini brushstrokes that we were talking about, like with Les's painting, for instance. We have these much larger, thicker brushstrokes. Very opaque way of painting. This reminds me a lot more of illustration and children's book illustration than maybe any of the other things we've seen so far. Very cool. Yeah, I don't have anything I could say or add to this. Really good job. I mean, just like, let's just take a scroll through all of these again. So here's Susan and Sue and Shelley and Paula and May and Les and Heidi and Elizabeth and Eleanor. Wow, that is so wild. The same bird painted like 10 different times by 10 different people, and each one looks a little bit different. Now, I just wanted to end here with Deborah's version of a different Robert Bateman painting. I think this is made... he did a number of eagles in the same kind of location. There's another one of his that's flying through the air that we almost did, but again, it was a little more complicated. That as a kid I had, you know, just a postcard of his that was framed in my bedroom when I was like 6 years old. I used to draw obsessively all the time. So I'm right along with you. I love this painting, and that is gorgeous. Okay, so this is the original, and this is what she did here. In the comments, she says, I should have listened to you, Michael, and just did the portrait. The full-bodied eagle was really hard. Deborah also says, Rick just said that her painting is like the eagle is saying, you are what I eat. Well done, Shelley. Interesting. Yeah, there's an intensity. Like, I mean, I love eagles. I mean, my wedding ring has an eagle on it. I used to draw eagles when I was a kid. Wanted to be a pilot, an astronaut, and I think like at our wedding, some eagles were flying over. They just have such. Their faces just seem to communicate so much. Talking about like infusing animals with human personality, like eagles just seem like. Anyway, so interesting. So that's the original. Yeah, I mean, you're definitely the whole body. All these feathers are very tricky, and you know, Robert Bateman has got to be one of the very best wildlife painters who ever lived, and it's great that we are able to have been able to share the planet with him while he was, I mean, he's still alive, but you know, he is like one of the links to the masters of the past, who painted, you know, like Audubon and the great like wildlife painters of the past. Anyway, so he's done a really great job of layering all of these. Like, see how these feathers. Like, even if we take our slider here, and let's just take out all the saturation. Let's make this black and white. So when it's black and white, we don't have the color to give us any clue anymore. All we have now is the values and the way that he's drawn all of these shapes, right? And he's still able to convince us that things go around the edges just really by how he's drawn all these different feathers. Now, if we look here, you've also done a pretty darn good job, Deborah. Again, this is not, you chose a little bit of a pretty tricky one to do, and I actually think you nailed the face. I think you did a great job with the face. Right? We look here, you did a great, excellent job. I think there could be a little bit of detail. It's a little slightly out of focus or low resolution for me to see some of the detail, but I think some things like we were talking about that other people included, just a little indication of a few little darker lines showing, because this is a very, like right now, this is like the eagle just came from the salon, right? And every feather is just perfectly in place, and we don't see a single, hair out of place. I think we want to see just one or two of those to make this look a little bit more realistic, right? Because in real life, like, animals are flying around, getting dirty, and all that kind of stuff, as much as they like to clean themselves. The feathers, I think it looks like I mean, obviously you were working to try to get this look of a little bit darker here and here. I wouldn't say, I think this is like a very admirable attempt. What could how would we improve this painting without, let's go back. Try and get these to line up a little bit nicer. Well, a few things I see is he's done a really great job with these highlights on the top here, right? And that could be just a little simple glaze, a little bit of a brighter glaze on top here to give a little bit more of a highlight on the tops of these shoulders, and then also darkening in behind here a little bit. And you can see how, I mean, obviously this takes a long time to be able to give definition of like shadows under here. Like some of them are laying nice and flat against, like some feathers are perfectly flat laying right on, and then a few of them are kind of up, right, here and there, and like these little shadows underneath, all of those defining. Like I think ultimately what I would say is there's his whole body is actually much lighter than this, right? There's actually a lot more darkness in here. So if this was my painting, what I would probably try to do is a little bit of lightening up and try to do a little bit of glazing. I mean, it'd be easier if we were starting over and just darkening in selective places. But I mean, this is just, I think it's really, you did a really good job. I'm just trying to think of how could we make it to get it to the level of Robert Bateman's original masterpiece. Deborah says the neck is wrong. I see what you're saying. Here the head is also is a little bit further out, right? Versus yours, the head is kind of back in. But that doesn't, I don't think that's necessarily wrong. Deborah also says, the eagle just came from the salon, LOL. It was hard, but I'm glad that I tried. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you did a great job. I should move on, but I think I'm super excited by that. Let's see. Okay, so there's a bunch more here. Soba Singh and Trilock Singh. How about... how many... Oh, we got... Whoa. So, how about... let's take a look at the paintings you guys did on your own, and then we'll finish up with Batman at the very end. So let's open up, because we got a lot of these to go here. So let's start here. This is what's nice is we've got a series of artworks here by Dolores. So here's the actual waterfall, and then here's her sketch of the waterfall. And I don't know if this is like I think this is just a like eyeballed it rather than tracing of any kind. Right? I think a really beautiful, actually, drawing. I love your style, Dolores. Really nice. Like this. This line has a. I always think of this type of a line as like a searching line. Like it's not just like quick brush or pencil marks, right? Which I always think those kind of marks. The way that language I use is always just like a fast mark or a confident mark. In that it's like I'm gonna like just go right and say that's like whoomp, and it takes a lot of confidence to put a dark, heavy, solid line in one big arc or straight line quickly like that, right? To work without being sloppy, right? Versus this is much more a sketchy line, right? A searching line where you can feel like your eyes are kind of attached to your finger and moving. Really nice pencil like mark making. I really like that. And then this is the watercolor that you put over top of it, which is a beautiful way of taking that drawing up to the next level. And you know, especially if we go up to the original, you really nailed some of the color, like the grays and even the browns in the water. Like I think a lot of people would be averse to putting brown in the water because they think, oh well, it's going to make the water look gross and dirty, like it's like sewage or something. Versus the whole point is that like when water starts going around in the waterfall, it's turning all of the sand and underneath the silt and it's reducing the clarity of the water. Right, great. Oh, it's really beautiful. These are obviously you've done a number of these. These would look like fantastic as like cards to give friends or postcards. You could easily get these things. If you scanned them, you could send them to get printed in various different places. Like, is it club? Let's see. Let's do. I think it's club card. Is it clubcard.ca? It's been years since I got a a business card made, but when was the last time I gave a business card away since the pandemic? But this is a website I used to use all the time because also as an artist we used to make postcards that we would send out to people all the time, right? So Club Card, you can let's see, what do they have? I'm not sponsored by these people at all, but so you could do a postcard, what is it? It must have like birthday cards, or yeah, a greeting card, I guess, right? So you do getting a greeting card, and they have a template, and you can just insert your picture into the template, upload it, and they're pretty darn cheap. Depending on the quality you get done, you could get 50. You could probably get, let's say, just off the top of my head, I bet you, if you look around there, or there's other websites, obviously, you could probably get 50 of these done on a really nice paper, nice thick paper cardstock for like the cheapest. I'm sure you could get like 50 for $50, and they'd be kind of thinner. But you could also do these on thick paper for like 150, and they would be gorgeous, like the kind of things you would buy at a stationery store or something. Anyway, I'll just continue and move on here. Let me see if I get this order right. So here's another example. This is Gail took a photograph, or I think this is a printout. I don't know if this is a photo that she took. And then it looks like she's traced over it to help get that image onto a piece of paper. And then this is the painting that she made from it. So this is a great example, of how you can take an image of your own, or this could be from a National Geographic or Life magazine or People magazine or wherever magazine you like, or from the front cover of the newspaper, etc. You can take it, trace it out onto canvas, or just like we do every episode, right? And then painting it. Yeah, really nice. And this is that gouache? It almost looks like, I think it's watercolor. I think it's mostly watercolor, but quite thickly applied. Maybe could be watercolor and gouache in there. Hard to tell. Or maybe tubed watercolor. But anyway, I just wanted to say that it's very exciting to see people using some of the techniques that we've used in the class to creating their own artwork. I mean, obviously that's ultimately the goal, obviously, right? This keeps on scrolling. What could I say? And this is just a little thing, but this fast mark making for the grass, to me, just looks a little bit on the sloppier side of things. I always think, and I see this, 9 out of 10 students that I have, at university will do the exact same thing. Because you've spent all of this time doing beautiful outlining, applying the paint so carefully everywhere, and then right at the very end you've taken a pen and then just very kind of quickly done the grass in. And it kind of just it's just if you're going to do that is to think about doing it nice and carefully, but giving it the same love and attention that you did on the previous layers of paint. Not a big deal, but I just think it does kind of reduce the it just doesn't have the carefulness of and the love and the attention that you've displayed elsewhere in the painting. Now, there's also a little bit of confusion in my mind as to exactly what we're looking at with these shapes here. I'm assuming this is a roof of I'm not even sure from the original. It kind of looks like this goat is on the roof of a house and this is a chimney of some kind. So in the original image, it's not clear either. So I think part of your role as an artist is to, I think anyway, is to clarify things a little. Now, I don't mind being confused. Oh, I just have to. These cameras are going to die here. 1 second. Just got to plug them in. Sorry. A new setup, and I'm not used to certain things. Actually, these camera batteries are about to die. I don't mind things being a little bit... I think it's actually a great thing when, as a viewer, you have to... You're walking by and you're like, what? Okay, what is going on in that painting? I think that's actually almost something you want in your artwork, is a tiny bit of confusion, because it forces people to stop and take an extra little bit of a look. The thing is you don't want people, and you want to reward people if they do stop and take a look, that they can eventually figure it out. So you reward them for stopping and taking that look, and then there are other clues there that will help clarify things. Here, I feel like I need some more hints as to exactly... this kind of goes back when we were talking about May and the trenches. This looks like a vertical, flat shape, whereas I think we're looking out of a window down onto the roof of a building, and this is... So, yeah, I think there just needs to be a little bit more clarification here. let's move on to another painting that Gail did. This is a photograph of David Hockney and Joni Mitchell, two of my favorite artists. I've actually had the honor of meeting Joni Mitchell at one of her art openings. I was like just so excited because we went to the same art school together in Calgary. We talked for like 10 minutes. But I don't remember anything we said. It's like one of those things you're like, Joni Mitchell is an amazing singer. If you're like, I was about to sing, but you'd know her music. Joni Mitchell and David Hockney. Obviously, we made a painting of his back in October or whatever in our intro painting class, the Sleeping Dogs. And then I love that she took that photograph and made this painting from it. And it's such a fun painting. Really cool. Way to go, Gail. And, David Hockney, I think actually your style in this case particularly works really well with not only David Hockney's style in the background, but also these two figures standing in here. Like, they seem to kind of, like, it's like you remember the movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit, where there's like the comic or the cartoon characters come into the real world and then they take people back into the cartoon world, and that's what kind of this reminds me of. It's almost like you've taken David Hockney and Joni Mitchell and pulled them into David Hockney's world, into his painting style. There's something very playful about this. I mean, they're also, just the clothes that they're wearing are like almost right out of his paintings too, and really like, yeah, you did a great job. Really nice. I like the way that the faces are painted. You did a great job with the skin tones, even their hands. There's a lot of like, there's a lot. You can feel the friendship in here. Smile on his face. He seems like more excited, and she's happy, but she's almost sort of like looking at the painter and like, how much longer how do we have to stand here for this painting, kind of thing. That is great. I think this is a great choice of image to paint, and you executed it very well. We got a few more Gail ones, but let's just skip, and I'll come back to a few Gail paintings here. Here's Gemini, and I remember I saw these on the Facebook page. I think these were great. These are two here. I can't remember if these are for friends or these are your pets at home, but really funny because of like, we see a lot of personality, especially in the dog. A lot of personality here. And then the color you put in the background is definitely a bold choice, and kind of a bit of an odd choice. I suspect it must have something to do with decor or colors that are important to you, or the person that commissioned you, or the gift that whoever, because it is striking, like that gray and black and red. Because I think in this one, that's all there is. There's a little bit of brown, but mostly just red everywhere. The one thing I would say is I feel like I want a little bit more personality in that eye. In the same way we've got, I mean, I don't know anything about cats' anatomies and eyes and everything, but it does feel like I want a little bit of, I mean, are cat's eyes just totally black like that? I don't know. I've had a few friends that have had cat or rabbits, and I guess I never really looked at their eyes very carefully. The other thing, it might be nice to see another paw. And this goes in, we've talked about this a few times, like when we're painting from photographs, and this is actually similar to what we were just talking about with Gale and the goat on the roof, is like, just because it works in the photograph doesn't mean it'll work in a painting. And sometimes you have to manipulate things in the painting and change it and make it wrong in order to make it look more believable. Because I feel like that other paw is probably, maybe it's hidden in behind here in the photograph, or maybe it's missing a paw, maybe it had an accident or something, I don't know. But if not, I feel like we'd want that to appear somewhere there. Like, in the same way, what's kind of funny is that, like, this dog, we only see these two little legs. We don't see the other legs or the tail. So it kind of almost makes it look like it's a person who's just got these little legs sticking out of its head, right? It almost has, like, no body. But it is kind of quite funny. I mean, I do enjoy it. I think it's good. This one I do think is more successful than the rabbit, just because I can see more personality, and there's definitely more dimension on the face, etc. Let's go to Gemini. This is another one by Gemini. Here's a pastel group of 7, Franklin Carmichael's Mirror Lake in pastel. That is really nice. Really nice use of pastels. I have hundreds of dollars worth of pastels over here that often when I go on vacation, I go and buy pastels because I'm thinking I want to do a lot of pastel stuff, and I never end up using them. But that is one medium that is a lot of fun to use, because pastels are about as close as you can get to painting and drawing in the same tool, where you have the line is also color that can be widened and manipulated, kind of like paint. So that is one material I should probably use more often. But it is like, this is great. This is really, really nice. The one thing I think about this kind of thing is we see all these little gaps of all this white shining through in between. I always think, like, you either want to, if you're gonna have things like that, is to, because we don't see much of it in the foreground, so I don't know why that is. If you're just more careful about overlapping shapes in the foreground. I always think if you're gonna leave stuff like this, then you should, like, really be demonstrative about leaving some gaps and make it more obvious, or tighten it up so it doesn't look like it's just an. I hear a dripping sound coming in from somewhere in my studio. It's pouring rain outside, so it makes me a little bit anxious where that's coming from. That'll be the first thing I check after we're done here, is where the dripping sound is coming from. Okay, anyway, so I guess I just as a viewer want confirmation that the white coming through is deliberate, not out of laziness or carelessness or whatever, right? So it's just always, it's about, like, giving the viewer signs. And so if, for instance, there was, like, big gaps here and there, we're like, oh, okay, that was done very purposefully for some artistic effect. And is maybe the background more open and unfinished than the foreground? That would be a really interesting stylistic choice to help create a distinction between foreground and background and depth and stuff. Yeah, I mean, again, I'm just being super nitpicky, but so here's This is while they were watching the Chi by Chi painting. I got an idea for a bookmark and wanted to do this. So this is, I think, totem poles at Stanley Park. And I love the idea of making, turning the same idea where we, for the Chi by Chi paintings, where we, these tall verticals, and then, but creating your own images in them, and then also cutting them out and making bookmarks of them. Making bookmarks out of your art is also super interesting. If you're painting on paper or you know, like in your sketchbook or on just sheets of watercolor, and you don't like your paint, instead of just tearing them up and throwing them out, why not cutting them into strips and turning them into bookmarks or making collages out of them, etc., right? I think there's something very interesting about, or you could even take the Chi by Chi painting and paint it on watercolor and cut them out and make bookmarks, right? I mean, because most of you have already done that as well, right? Very cool. Okay. Oh, there's a few. There's. I think I'm going to save those till the end. Here we got a bunch from Josh. Let's dive into these by Josh. So Josh here. This is the Chi by Chi. So we'll talk about that next time because we won't have time to talk about all the paintings we did of our Chinese and Japanese artists. That'll be our next session. But here was it up on the wall next to the Warhol ones that you did, a whole bunch of Warhols that you hung. I like, looks really great. I love the frames that you used here. In fact, I'd be interested to know what frame, because I think this is, looks like you painted it on a canvas panel. So what kind of frame did you use to put around your canvas panel? This is a cup being filled with coffee. I remember seeing this on the Facebook page, and you asked for some feedback here because you said there was something not working with this painting. And I think just again, this is in the drawing class, but right now I'll just do. You've got a cup, or it's kind of like this. Here, let's just show these side by side so you can, like, that's sort of like what this cup looks like, right? Now, I don't mind it like that, right? And here's your coffee coming in. There is some distortions in here which are relatively easy to fix. So if I was to try to do this again, I think you've got the cup itself is pretty good, right? So we've got these curves. I think it's your the what do you call it? The cup in the saucer that needs to be fixed, because right now the saucer almost looks like it looks almost like the saucer is like that shape. A little bit. I'm kind of exaggerating it just so to make it more obvious. Whereas I think you probably want a circular saucer. So in that sense, like this saucer would probably be something more like that shape, right? So in order to help fix this painting, what I would do if this was my painting is to try to, you want something more like that. So extending the saucer down. Now, well, we'll get to that in a second because your painting cuts off here, but also see how the saucer kind of, in yours, just kind of curves in? We want it to come up that way. So now your canvas kind of comes down here like that. So what I would see, and it looks like you tried to bend the saucer in so that it would fit on the canvas. So there's no reason why that saucer can't go off the page, right? And just extending it a little more here. Same sort of thing up here. And it looks like maybe you're thinking about doing that as well, but you chose not to. But I think we want this to appear to go in behind. And really, that would be the main thing that I would do to quote unquote fix that painting. Like, I don't think there's much else to it that is like wrong. As opposed other things beyond the kind of the saucer shape, I think what we need is maybe more reflections in the water to give it more of a watery quality, because right now this could be like I don't know what, it could be like a stick or a straw or something coming out of the water, and this could also be sand or mud. It doesn't have a very watery quality, right? So like, even if I'm just looking inside I wonder if we can show this at all. Like, you see how, like, even, well, it's really hard to see, but in my teacup there is these little reflections, and if I was to pour water, like, my water's not high enough, so it's hard to see, but we need some probably close to white. Like, if this was water being poured, in fact, let's just do a quick little search here. So you see, like, all of the reflections that we're missing right here. Like, we need a little bit more light, and we need some light on the lip of the cup. A bunch of those things are missing right here. So what this makes me, the way that I think when I see this is it looks like this is like a very porous piece of clay that is just absorbing light. And if anything, it also needs more shadow too. It needs more contrast. We have a lot of middle value here, so we need like a really bright brown on the lip here coming around. I mean, I don't know where it looks. We got shadow here, so that almost looks like, I don't know, the light could be coming. It's not clear to me where the light is coming from in this painting. It could be coming from the bottom left, because we've got a little reflection here and here. Then we have this shadow here, which makes it look like the light is coming from here. And then we've got this shadow here, which makes it look like the light is coming from. So that's another thing that, as an artist, is giving more clarity as to where the light is coming from, and using both shadows and highlights to help clarify that. So lights on reflections and shadows on the cup. Like, is there a shadow for the handle on the cup? Is there shadow from this water and whatever, like, is there a tea kettle where that's being poured out of? Oops. Something happened there. Yeah, so we're just missing the little tiny details like that. And what's amazing, like, and I imagine maybe that you made that painting from your imagination, and because here's a number of other paintings, Josh, that you've done that are very effective, and some of them are inspired by other paintings where some of those artists have done a little bit of that work for you to help kind of solve some of those problems. There's an Edgar Payne tree painting. That's really nice. So that's beautiful. I really like this warm underpainting you put under here, like this kind of almost orangey brown. It really, like, is a lot of light coming through. That's great. Right, look, here's another great painting you did, Josh. This is Vermeer's Girl with a Red Hat. Really gorgeous. Like you see, like look at the nice bright highlights on here. Right, even that little highlight on the nose, gorgeous. Here's one that Josh did of a Cezanne painting. I think you really nailed the colors of Cezanne. I don't think I have a Cezanne painting coming up soon. I would like to do a Cezanne. Paul Cezanne was one of the, people often refer to him as like the father of modernism or the grandfather of modernism, because artists like Picasso and Braque really used him as the influence for Cubism, and really kind of, helped jumpstart the whole modernist or avant-garde movements at the turn of the last century. The one thing with Cezanne is we see a lot of like hard angles here, and this seems very flowy, so I think we want to see a lot more sharp edges and these faceted planes, right? That's a big feature of Cezanne's work. Here's this is Cezanne painting, and this must be an earlier Cezanne flowers. I'm not familiar with this one. This is you did a really nice job with this painting, though. I really like this. This is a great job, Josh. Here's one of elephants. You wanted to paint an elephant because it's an endangered species for our Paint the News. We'll keep that in mind. If elephants come up in the news again, let's put that on our radar. I'd love to do an elephant painting, because elephants would be really kind of a tricky animal to paint. The texture of their skin, their hide, is very matte, right? It's like very so without I'd have to think about how to paint that. I haven't looked at an elephant photo or anything in a long time, but I would imagine that would pose some unique challenges. Here's a Georges Seurat painting, which is, this is what, the Sunday evening on the Sunday afternoon in the park or whatever. I think this is at the Chicago Institute of Art. This is a big painting, but it's also done with tiny little dots, right? So it's interesting you painted that painting in a much more impressionist style. So I love that you're using all these different styles, exploring all these different artists. I think this is gorgeous. So this is a really nice painting you did, Josh. And it's great that you're doing so many paintings. Here's this goldfinch. That is really nice. I really like this blue in here, where you've got this teal interacting with all these different yellows and purples. Really, I mean, maybe the original bird had all those colors in there and you're just nailing them, but it looks really great as a painting. Really vibrant colors. Here's a painting you did of some flowers. That's really nice. This is that a Van Gogh, or I'm not sure. That's really nice. Great application of paint too. Really, really nice. I think here's another. This one's based on a Van Gogh. Great job at speaking. Oh, let's look at one more. Van Gogh's vase with zinnias and flowers. Well, we'll get there in a second. You did a version of his famous painting of a chair. That is beautiful too, Josh. Wow, good job. These really nice outlining of things. Really, you did a really great job of noticing the colors that he's using in these paintings. And here's the Duke of Urbino. Very good. That's nice. I would maybe be a little bit more subtle with some of these hairs coming off the back of his head, but ultimately, like getting the skin tones painted and the subtlety there, I think that this works very, very well. Anything else by Josh here to go through? Got a lot of these. Okay, I want to try to plow through a bunch here. Here's moving on to Laurie's painting. Here's Humpty Dumpty. That's That is great. Now, how did you get that texture back here? It almost looks like you've glued something down there. Or it's just really thickly applied paint. I don't know, but it is a really interesting strategy. Maybe you posted more information in the Facebook group. I don't know. Either way, it looks like you really nailed the texture of that rock. Rocks are really hard to paint because, again, rocks are, unless they're wet, are usually not very shiny at all. So how do you add light and dark to a matte surface, right? It takes a lot of subtlety to do that. And you have to kind of both have some very sharp, hard edges, because rocks can also be very rough looking, but then making it still look natural and not like a plastic or metal, right? So rocks have been giving artists fits for, 500 years. This is great, though. This is very funny, very playful painting. Lots of different things in here. Little things that I would suggest that would help make this painting even better might be just a little shadow or something. I know it's obviously a cartoonish kind of image, but you've also spent all this time on the rocks trying to make them look believable. So I think, goodness, a little bit, like just a, like when we did with the Peppa Pig, just a tiny little shadow underneath. That might look kind of nice. Yeah, or even a little bit of this grass maybe coming a bit over top of their feet, because again, this grass sort of looks very flat. We want something to make the grass look like it's coming towards us and not just dropping straight off, like a part of the, like as if these are just vines growing up the wall. We want it to kind of come outward towards us. So even just a very hint of a shadow here, and maybe the shadow of Humpty kind of underneath here or against the wall. Lots of interesting things you could do here. Laurie says, it's thick medium mixed with sand medium in rocks, then painted over. Okay, that's what I was going to say. It almost looked like there was some kind of rock texture in there. Yeah, like, I mean, this is a very fun, playful painting. I also think it's very interesting the way that you did these, like, arms, like, the way that everything's painted here has, like, such an interesting, unique quality. Like, it's a very, idiosyncratic, specific style that you're developing here. Like, I could see this could be a really cool, interesting way of doing a children's book, is like painting with all these different textures and photographing them and putting them in a book or scanning them. There's some interesting possibilities here for sure. Just really quickly before I move on, if you are going to put shadows here, obviously, the shadow of this figure, if it's floating above, would be less sharp, would be kind of like it would be dark, and kind of how it would be diffused, versus the shadows down here would be a sharper and harder edge because they're closer, they're literally touching the ground, and they'd be attached to the body. Great job, Laurie. Here's another one that Laurie did too. Now I think this is like just I don't know if this is totally abstract or if there's intended to be some kind of image here or what it's based on. I don't know. I think it's really beautiful. I mean, again, I always just, my mind immediately starts going to imagery, so it looks like some sort of, like a floating orb or a candle underneath some sort of structure. I'm not sure. But it is, what's nice is these reoccurring colors, so this, because it looks like this reflected light coming up underneath this arch underneath. I think who this reminds me of. The way that you've painted these colors and darken them, or is that a glaze that you've put over top of them? But especially even considering like this is the same artist who made these two paintings, right? I mean, they couldn't be more different, except that they're abstractions of reality. I mean, every painting is an abstraction of reality, but these are when we talk about abstract painting or non-representational painting, one is very cartoony and the other one has a much more mysterious quality. Yeah, I'd be interested to know which one you prefer painting, like, is like one of them a gift to somebody and you're painting a particular kind of style? Because these are, couldn't be, they're so different that I wonder if let's say this one is a gift to some children and then this one is your maybe more personal artwork, or vice versa or something, right? Let's just move. There's a few things I want to come back to, so we'll save these towards the end. Here's some paintings by Paula. So here this is, I remember seeing this on the Facebook. This is gorgeous painting, Paula. I can't remember if this is a friend or self-portrait, but really nice, bold, courageous uses of color, like these reds and purples and yellows and dark, like phthalo blue, cold blue in the hair, and then purple, like purpley lips. All these kind of things that takes a lot of courage to apply color in such like dramatic fashion. Like, it reminds me famous no, it's green. So I don't know if you've ever seen this painting before by Henri Matisse. This is The Green Line, and this is a very famous painting of his because it was quite shocking to people when he painted it. It's like, whoa, like, why did you paint this big green stripe down the middle? I think this is a painting of his wife, and 1905, this would have been quite radical for the time, right? And so it makes me think of like this, the way that you're approaching this painting is like very bold uses of color, very, we would call like expressionist uses of color. I would really encourage you to go full on with this kind of stuff. It looks really cool, and it's I think it's also quite liberating. We've done a lot. Maybe it would be worth doing a face where color is really wildly explored, like that Matisse painting, because I think often when I'm teaching children, when I go into a school and do a workshop with kids, and I've often done. A couple of years ago, I went to a school here in Vancouver, and we did the entire school. So I don't know, like 600 or 700 kids. I went through every classroom and taught every single kid in the school how to draw their own self-portrait. And then they had this giant exhibition in the gym where they had all of the paintings all on display, and they had a big party and everything. It was so cool. And so we had like kindergarten kids up to high school kids with all of their work, and obviously the high school kids had much more developed paintings, but you'd be surprised how good like little kids can paint. Like, it doesn't take much to show them some of these basic techniques, and it's so exciting to and so anyways, long story short, is one of the things that I suggested, because we did a few things, activities, but one of them was you can do a painting of a face, but you cannot use the real colors. So rather than mixing a skin tone, a flesh tone as you see it or as you think that they're supposed to be done, you can't, it has to be green or purple or pink or blue, right? And the hair can't be brown or black or blonde or yellow. It's got to be you know, again, green or orange, or it's, you know, you have to like, and you can immediately see kids go from like, oh, I don't know, like this is so hard, to like, I can do anything, I can make it any color, wow. So, and it was just like, that fear of doing it wrong just went right out the window, and it's so exciting. All of a sudden they're just like, oh, I'm gonna make my hair is gonna be blue. What color is your hair? It's gonna be green. Oh, this is so exciting. Okay, what color are you gonna do your skin? Oh, yours is gonna be purple. Oh, I don't know, mine's gonna be yellow, and I'm gonna have like blue spots on it. And it's just like, it's just so liberating for people to, instead of trying to do things right or like they are, doing things like they would want to do with their imagination. So I think that's one of your most successful paintings, Paul. Great job. Here's the Peppa Pig. Oh, you know what? We'll talk about Peppa Pig in a future episode, because that one should be with the Peppa Pig paintings we did. This one I think you titled Friendship, and the other one was Family. But this is great. This is maybe your pets at home, the dogs and cats getting along. That is really nice. That's a great painting, Paula. Very fun. I also really like these quite bold color choices. The blue right next to the red, or the red sandwiched between two different blues. You got your colder blue and warmer blue, so you're using all the color theories we've been talking about. Really good. Great job. I think, and also, you know, you've painted the fur in quite a nice way. I like it. There's almost like a very nice softness to this, the fur on the dog. Well done. Let's keep on rolling here. Got so many to look at. This is another great portrait, Paula. You know, using like a little bit of the blue right in the face, and look at this, the hair, right? Like it takes a lot of courage to apply paint in dramatic ways like that. And often it's actually surprising how really accurate it actually is. Here's another one by Paula, a dancer. That's really nice. This, you know, reminds me of like the Moulin Rouge, you know, Toulouse-Lautrec, Degas, and all the other artists that hung around there at that time. This is also a very successful painting of yours. I like the bra strap or whatever kind of coming down her shoulder like that, because she's like in the midst of a dance, or maybe she's putting a dress or shawl or something on. I'm not sure. That's great. Really nice. Good job. Yeah, getting better and better, Paul, every day. Now let's take a look at Sharon. Has got a few flowers here. These are just like screenshots. I'm not sure. Is that the same flower? Just a close-up of it? Could be. Yeah, I think this one was, yeah, a photo you said it was a work in progress, and then here it is finished. So this is the same thing zoomed out. Very cool. This one looks really nice. This is great, Sharon. It's so interesting. Again, like your style of painting, we have a lot of like smaller brush strokes that you're using to build up. There's a few people that have been doing that throughout. And you're really able to get some really nice blending in your flowers. So I'd be really interested to see how you would paint, like, let's say the Agnes Pelton painting we did last week. I'd love to see, Sharon, if you tried your technique to painting a painting like the Pelton painting, or some of the other ones, just to see how this style would apply to something beyond flowers, something not more complicated, because flowers are some of the most complicated things around, but just to really challenge yourself, because I think you can paint these flowers really well. So it'd be fun to see how you would go beyond that. I just want to come up, and a few things that I skipped over a bit here. I'm going to come up to, here's a painting Gail did. This is of a friend, a musician friend is what she said. I think this is a great painting. I don't know if this is something you've given to this friend of yours or what, but I'm sure they would be very flattered to see this. What a few things I think. I wonder if you painted this design or if that's something you cut out and glued on there. Either way, it looks, if you painted it some really great small brushwork in there. If you cut it out and glued it on there, which I have no problems with, come on. Okay. Then that's also a very smart use of collage, right? There's no reason why you can't do that. There are like Willem de Kooning, who we'll talk about relatively soon, is famous for having cut out parts like of people's faces and gluing them into his fully abstract canvases. So we see a little eye or lips coming through. And so it might be, especially on a t-shirt, I think it works really well. Little tiny, I mean, this is pretty darn close to a really, really great painting. I think it's just a little bit, I could see a tiny bit more contrast and shadows just to define a little bit more, even. Although, you know what, maybe it's done. I always just think often a little bit more contrast can help put things over the edge, but yeah, maybe it's good. Maybe that. Here's a painting. Now we're gonna do in what, just two weeks or a week from now, we're gonna do a painting by this same artist. So here, Gail did a version. We're not going to do this one, the wine drinker, but we're going to do one. I think it's called the Proud Father, on Father's Day. But this is an exceptional version of this painting, Gail. Wow, look at these. You know, his style. He's like, you actually nailed his style pretty darn close. Like, he's quite known for this very loose, brushy, like, there's an immediacy with the way that he paints that I think you captured really well. Like, you don't get the sense with his style that, I mean, this is actually not the best example of it, but you don't get the sense that he overworked his canvases too much. Now, this would be an oil painting, so he did really nice blending in here. But I think you did a great job. What could I say to improve on this? What I would say, maybe, you know, there's up on here on the top of his head, see, when we go back, you'll see how there's a little bit of like a purple highlight on the top of his face that helps separate that area and just defines his nose. You see that right up there? That would be the one thing that I would say could be helpful. Otherwise, I think you've done a pretty darn good job elsewhere in this painting. That's a tricky painting. So I'm proud of you for selecting it. I did want to mention here, Vanya took this photo of the Vancouver skyline at night in False Creek, I think, and said this would make a great photo to paint one day. And then it was interesting, Charmaine posted this one. Here's this kind of maybe it's not the exact same scene in the day. It looks like they're pretty darn close. You guys managed to line up your, yeah, because here we've got this one building and this building here. Is that the same? So yeah, those two here. That's close. So yeah, it might be kind of, the one thing I would say, there are a bunch of people from Vancouver in the class, so it'd be kind of fun to do a Vancouver scene. I was trying to think about like what would be the most universally, you know, approachable painting for people to do. You know, would somebody in Sydney, Australia, or Amsterdam, or Berlin, would they want to paint a Vancouver scene? This might be more along the lines of something that for you guys to do on your own. I'd have to think of like if there's something more, something even more Vancouver-like that might appeal to somebody outside of Vancouver. I guess would just from my own for the channel for other people tuning in from elsewhere in the world. But I do like the idea of painting a water scene, and I also think I like the idea that Charmaine even added to this the same image a second time at a different time of day. This goes back to like Claude Monet painting haystacks at, doing hundreds of paintings of haystacks, not only some at sunrise, sunset, in the middle of the day, and towards the evening, but at all year round. So when there's snow on the ground, and when it's scorching hot, and when it's fall and spring, etc., and really kind of capturing light at different times of day and through different times of the year. Scroll through here because there's things I've been skipping over along the way as we get close to wrapping up here. Oh, where do we want to end? Oh, there's a bunch of things that I skipped over. Let's take a look at a few things that people have done that they've gotten. I want to talk about this. Let's talk about Batman, and then I'm going to come back to this if I remember. We don't have that. We got five Batman paintings to look at. So, just threw these in here. Okay, so here's the original Batman that we made our painting from. And then let's look at, here's Peter's version of Batman. I know he was really excited to paint a comic book character. That is really great, Peter. Really great. Actually, I think you did a better job with this little white glaze of fog than I did. That makes me really excited. And you did actually a really nice job down here too. That looks really cool. So this is a really well done version of that painting. And also I remember, I think I put way too many lines in the sky, and so you were very smart, because I think when I was like, I was doing it, I probably shouldn't have put so many lines here. So you were listening to that and like, okay, I'm going to take away some of those extra unnecessary lines. So that turned out really well. That's a great job. I don't have anything to add to it. Well done. Here's May's version of the painting. Oh, cool. Similarly, I really like the way you did the ground down here. I think all of these lines are supposed to be diagonal, so there's a few here that are sort of disobeying that rule, that look a little bit unruly. Does it make a difference? Not really. I don't think it's a problem. But just thinking like this, if you were to redo it, I think it might be going. See how they're all kind of going in this diagonal angle, or sorry, yeah, that, which kind of like that angle, like that. And then you've got that, but then you've got a few that are kind of quite straight up and down, like this one and this one. Again, not a big deal. The glaze, I did the same sort of thing, whereas I think I really should have added another pass of white glaze over top of here just to get that strip of fog passing in front of the moon a little bit more clear. But pretty good. I mean, there's also a lot of little line work in this painting, which made it deceptively difficult. Here's Gemini's version. Wow, that's great. Again, 3 different paintings we've seen so far, 3 different approaches. And this is on paper, right? So that's, I That's also how we've got a much smoother surface to paint on. And again, same sort of thing with that glaze, and I would have just done that a little bit more, a little more white in there. But again, I did it poorly on mine. Doesn't surprise me why. I think you guys are just following my lead, and sometimes I slip up here and there, right? That turned out great. I'm really happy with that. Here's Dolores's version. That looks great. Yeah, so this one's, Dolores made a decision just to omit some of these lines up here, not to make this kind of darker purpley, like here's this version that Peter did. So it's some interesting choices that were made here. Not outlining the moon. Yeah, I think I think this, by outlining it, is an interesting creative decision. I think I either keep it outlined and paint it darker. It now looks like he's standing on a special outlined spot on the ground, like it's you know, I don't know, like, you know, where a helicopter lands on the top of a building, like there's something, it's like, why is there a circle on the ground? Versus other ones that sort of looks like a shadow. I see here Gemini omitted that entirely, which is, you know, certainly within her right to do that. I do think that there's, especially because we have this bright moon in behind, I mean, obviously if you were to paint it as it really should be painted, and if that was the source of light, that his shadow would actually be stretching straight towards us. But it is, Bob Kane took some stylistic liberties there, right? And here's Deborah's version that she signed Bill Finger and Bob Kane. I think that's very funny. I appreciate that. And took some choices to also change a little bit of the so totally different. All of these, it's so, I just love this. I love seeing how each painting turns out differently. Like, personally, it would be really boring and disappointing to me if everyone, at the end of the day, submitted paintings that all looked the same. They all looked like mine, and you know, basically there would be no reason for me to do. I mean, maybe I would be like, oh well, you didn't do this one. You need to go back and fix this to make it more like mine. I love seeing everyone diverging, especially as you paint more and more. It's really worth thinking a little bit about why you made the decisions to change things in certain places, and why you did things differently than I did and from the original. And I'm sure some of you be like, oh, I have no idea. I guess it's just a big mistake. Yeah, maybe. But there's probably also a part of you that felt like compelled to change things in a certain way, or you didn't feel right doing it in one way, you didn't feel comfortable, it felt awkward or strange, and so you made a decision to alter things in some way. And maybe the answer would be like, well, there's a lot of small details, and I don't like doing small details, or doing small details makes my hands hurt, or makes my eyes sore. Those are really, I mean, it might seem like just like, you know, throwaway things, but it is worth really thinking about. It's like, okay, well, if doing lots of small detail it does not interest me for whatever reason, then it can also, like, that would be something important to know going forward as to, like, the kinds of paintings you're going to make. Well, if doing small details is not something I like, well, then I'm probably not going to try doing really complex crowd scenes in my paintings, right? And so if you were traveling and you're staying in a hotel overlooking a busy street in Paris, and you're like, oh, and it's raining, so you don't want to go walk. Rather than painting a picture of people running through the streets with their umbrellas and trying to get their faces and mustaches and top hats or whatever, and do all those fine details, you might want to paint it in a much more impressionist kind of a way, right? There's some great paintings by Camille Pissarro of that same sort of thing, where it's like people just look like, you know, each person just like one stroke of a brush, right? So anyway, I could talk at length of that kind of thing, but it is, I think, really fun to start seeing like how you can approach paintings differently. Okay, let's just see. Let's just scroll through these Batman paintings. Right? Isn't that neat? I can almost see like an animation. With Maze here, it's like Batman, he's like saying something. You just look at his mouth. Anyway, I was probably giving somebody seizures there. Let's scroll up here, because now I want to start kind of winding things up. If you've found today's episode helpful or interesting, please like and subscribe to the channel. That would be super helpful. Let's take a look here. This is a painting Les submitted last time, and he said he was Saturday's feedback class encouraged me to risk adding some detail on the Bateman Fox painting I posted. So this was the original, which I think is actually a really nice painting. I actually like seeing some of this yellow coming through. For some people, this would be a totally finished painting, and some people, this would be a great underpainting of which to do more on. But I'm also very proud of Les for going back and working on it some more. It would be up for you guys to decide, for Les to decide how he feels about it. I can't remember in the chat on the Facebook what his kind of final reactions were to see these two paintings side by side. I do think it like there's a number of things that have arguably improved in this second. Like, for instance, I love this little piece of grass that or plant that is kind of sprouted up in the foreground, and the little tiny details on there. And I haven't seen this I probably have seen, but I don't remember this Robert Bateman painting. I don't know if that was in there originally, but it does add some nice definition to the like immediate foreground, right? Because now we have multiple spaces in this painting, whereas before everything was really one big middle ground, right? I mean, you could say this thing was a foreground, and then the fox was you could say this is a foreground, and fox is a middle ground, and this black is a background. But here we now really have much more distinct space here. This is definitely a foreground shape, and then our middle ground, and then our background. Even this little things in the background here. The way that you've added all this texture to the fox and the whiskers and the fur, I think that's really beautiful. It's like that turn. Again, it's hard to say, because I like the speed and the immediacy that you just knocked that painting out, and then you went back and you really added a lot of detail. Now, I do like this a lot. I would, and I'm very, I've said it before, but I would say it again over and over. I'm super proud of you for having the courage to do this. A lot of people would not. What is going on? Looks like this camera just overheated, so I'll just turn it off anyway. I think we're going to go back up here. It doesn't feel that hot in here, but I am standing here in a shirt like this, so I guess it's not that cool. Anyway, sorry. It takes a lot of courage to go back into a painting you finished and walked away from, to then go back and work on it a little more. I would say that I think now that you've gone, like, if you almost think of it as like distances, like you did this one painting and you went 3 blocks down the road, and you're like, okay, that's cool, and then you took the painting and then you went 20 blocks further down the road, and now you know what it looks like 30 blocks down the road. I think, and I'm sure people could argue with him, but I would actually think you may want to even think about something in between these two, because I like the looseness that you painted this fox. I think it's gorgeous, and I do really like it here, but I do think it might have lost a little bit of the spontaneity that the previous one had. Now, I don't know what you were going for in these paintings, but it does seem a little bit duller, right? There's significantly more white that's been added to it, and maybe some gray or black, and when we add white, gray, and black to things, right, we desaturate the painting. So all of the really nice bright colors have kind of been lost in this new version. But that is also totally a personal, as I've said many times, I tend to paint brighter. I tend to have I am attracted to more bright color palettes, and if you don't like bright colors, there's probably a lot of people who don't, right? Yeah, I don't know. I could talk about that forever. I'd be interested to know what other people think. Let's take a look at another one. This is a painting Irene did. So here's version number 1, and then after our critique, she went back and added a little bit more to this painting. Now, it's pretty subtle, the kind of changes that she made, and we also have a slightly different, background that the painting is on, and that kind of affects things a bit. So it looks like there's been a bit of work done in the sky. Maybe even the sun was painted a little bit more white, and then we see some texture in the white caps. All right, you can see that. So I think we've got some purple up here, again white down here, and then these little dotted things. I do think it definitely improved the painting for sure, absolutely. And it seems to glow more than this one. It could just be the lighting, I don't know. And I do really like the more texture in the water. One thing I would say, is when it comes to the water, I think right now we've got these little. Oh, I turned that camera off. I think, especially as these waves get closer to us, I think they might be a little bit longer and wider, because we have them, they're all the same length, no matter how close or far away they are from us. So as they are closer to the horizon, they'd be much smaller and closer together. And then as they move towards us, they would get like longer, bigger, have more detail to them. Very, very, tiny detail here, but I do think that that might even improve the painting even more. Not saying that you need to go and do a third, working on this painting, but just something to consider going in the future, right? That as things are closer to the foreground, we see more detail, and they get bigger. Things as they go further, they lose detail, they lose saturation, and they lose size, right? Ultimately, those are small things. This painting is really, like, the light that you've generated in here feels like nice and warm, right? This is another painting. This is the original version that Heidi submitted, and we talked about last time. And this is the updated version of it. So we can just kind of go back and forth. First and second. First and second. And this is another example where, like, wow, what a difference. I mean, in lots of different areas. So, like, this is the second, or not second version, but just the second, she went back and added to it. So little things that you'll notice is these shadows that she put underneath the what would this be, the roof or awning, like all these little shadows, and also how you brightened up the face. So if we look, there's the original, or the first draft, I guess, maybe, and here's the second one. You also darkened in the windows, you know, of things going on in there. You darkened things in the bushes, and actually even lightened a few things up too. Like you can see how you've darkened in and around here, darkened in here. I mean, I think, oops, that your second version is definitely better, and it's really exciting to see how you took some. It makes me, just as a teacher, whenever anybody listens to me, I get really excited. I'm like, wow, people are actually paying attention. But I think you should also feel really excited and satisfied by how the improvements that were made in this painting. You know, even like little things that are seem to be outside of the painting, right? Like this now, I have a clearer idea of where the light is coming from in this painting. The light, you know, this has more of a middle of the day kind of a light, where the light is coming from probably pretty high up, right? And so we're getting these kind of strong shadows coming down from above, and we see her face. There's not a lot of shadow on her face. Versus this one, like, she kind of looks a little bit darker, almost like it almost looks like she stepped out of a horror movie or something, right? Because it's just like really dark face. The light, it's not clear where the light is coming from. We even have like light appearing to come from behind these bushes. So there's something a little bit strange or uncanny about this painting that might cause us a slight discomfort. Whereas this one, now we have a little bit more clarity as to where the light is coming from, which I think just settles the mind a little bit. Unconsciously, when a viewer looks at it, they go like, oh, because I walk around in the real world and I see how light interacts with things, and it doesn't. Whereas I think something like this, there's something slightly weird and odd and might cause that slight discomfort, right? Versus there's something, you've come much closer to nailing things in this painting, which is just very satisfying. I think you should feel super happy with this painting. And then here, I think maybe we'll end right here. So this is a photograph that Eleanor found, and I'm not even sure where this is from. This reminds me, this looks like Echo Park in Los Angeles, kind of very close to where I used to live. I think, I'm not sure. Anyway, so this is a photograph, and it looks like this could be right out of a National Geographic or a calendar or something. We have this really nice hot sunset, and everybody is basically silhouetted against that sunset. And this is her version of that photograph, which I think is outstanding. I mean, I'm so excited, because I think you did a fantastic job with the sunset. Even this kind of dry brush here, like I think a lot of people would have felt very compelled to do a lot of blending in this, right? To blend these, like a yellow into a orange, and then into a red, and then into a pink, and then into a purple, and then into a blue. Instead, you are very bold about your use of big brush strokes to do this, and so you laid down this probably a cool yellow in back here, and then painted subsequent layers of color over top of it, which give it just like a real, like, it feels like if there's a lot of confidence in this painting, in the way that you've applied it, and then all these reflections in here and the silhouettes. I like how you removed this other character here, person, who was just sort of sitting there, but kind of didn't really help the story of the painting at all. And this other tree was here, but it was cut off, so you brought the tree back into the picture. You know, all of these are very, they seem very small, minor creative choices, but they are like very, very important, right? Now our focus is on these people here. Now we feel like, oh, there's this like couple and they're standing next to the water. Maybe it's their honeymoon, or they're out on their first date or something, or, you know, like, and so it draws our attention to these people. And also just like the water down here, like we get it that it's water, because we understand that these are these must be some sort of reflections, the way that you've quickly painted it. Like that, this is a really, really nice painting. It's a, you know, a relatively simple painting. I don't mean that as a derogatory, pejorative. Sometimes like a simple painting is like some of the best paintings. Like we'll look at this Francisco Goya painting in a few weeks, and it is a small, simple painting, but it's one of the most famous paintings in human history, and it's a gorgeous painting, right? And so sometimes these, like, if you can capture this in like even just the way that you painted these, like some people would have really fussed over getting all of the I guess, are they the leaves on the palm tree, like all of the tiny little hairs and strands, whereas you've almost used like a slightly dry brush to capture that and do them like these very fast little marks. And it makes me super, super happy that that you did that. Looks great. See, Paula in the chat says, "Thank you, Michael. I'm glad that we are moving forward with your critiques. I am thankful that I joined this wonderful class." Thank you, Paula, for such a generous comment. I appreciate that. Okay. So we still have lots of paintings that I would love to cover, but we just haven't had a chance to go through all of them. So we still have, like, there's a few from our Paint the News class, the Haley Wickenheiser, the women's hockey painting, to do, and then we've got all of these, like, Whistler's Mother, the Star Wars painting, all of these paintings by the Chinese artists and the Japanese artists for Asian History Month that we did. Yeah, and then obviously the most recent ones, the Peppa Pig, etc., right? Superman. So we'll tackle all those paintings in the next session, which will be probably about a month from now, because I'm going to be doing a few bonus painting episodes on the weekend over the next month. So, and also I would say a number of the other ones that we haven't gotten to also, you know, if I just scroll through these, some of them have more than others, right? So especially some of the most recent ones, there's very few paintings I've seen on the Facebook page. So that gives people time to finish those paintings and upload those paintings. I know not everyone is painting with me live. The vast majority of people watch the episode at their own convenience much later. Usually there's about 10 to 20 people watching me live, and then there's 200 people who paint with me afterwards, right? So, and sometimes those people are painting a few weeks after. So giving everybody another month to catch up I think makes the most amount of sense. Okay, so anything else I want to mention or chat? If you have an opportunity, I think you may find it interesting to watch an episode or two of James Gurney before we make one of his paintings on Tuesday. I think you'll find these. James Gurney is very famous for a book called Dinotopia, and they made a movie or a TV series out of it. But he was actually a best friend of Thomas Kinkade, and so Thomas Kinkade and him did a lot of painting together. And so it's really interesting to see these two guys and how their careers went in very different ways. Thomas Kinkade obviously became a very famous artist in his own right, painting like little cottages and forests, and James Gurney decided to also paint things from his imagination, but instead of painting little houses in the forest, he decided to paint dinosaurs and flying cars and all sorts of fantastic things. So both really interested in the imagination, just did very, very different things from it. So we will explore his work on Thursday, and then I think it's Miriam Shapiro or his work on Tuesday, Miriam Shapiro on Thursday, I think Sokoto on Sunday, and then Goya on Tuesday. So we got a lot of painting coming up. 4 paintings over the next week to do if you're interested in watching all of them. There should be something for everyone in there. So thanks again, everyone, for joining me, for supporting the channel. I cannot believe how many people are always tuning in and participating, and the community on the Facebook page is like so heartwarming. It gives me so much hope for humanity to see people who've never met before all kind of working together to support one another. It is a really beautiful, touching thing. So thank you so much to everyone. And thank you also to the people who've been donating. There's a PayPal link below. And there's some people that have been contributing lots of money over and over and over again. And you can see slowly things are getting better and better in the studio. Things are getting cleaner back here now that I've been organizing. So I'm very grateful for your continued financial support as well. I'm very, very touched that you would that you believe and support in my goals and my mission as well. So I'm more than happy to spend time like this to give a little bit of feedback to all of you guys. And everything I've seen here is just like, it's so exciting. So keep on going, keep on painting, and let's see more of this work. I especially really like seeing the stuff that you guys are doing on your own. So continue exploring that. And if you have only been painting things that I've been doing, I would encourage you maybe to think about doing a painting of your own over the course of, let's say, the next month in advance of our next episode. Think about something that you would like to paint, and maybe and not following it. You could do a painting of another artist that we haven't covered, but I also think it would be kind of fun for you to try thinking about painting, maybe a painting of a pet of yours, painting a picture of your home, like the outside of your home, or the view from your window, or a toy that's meaningful to you. Just take a picture of it, or paint from life, or a simple still life. Take a picture from a vacation that is meaningful to you, and think about just making. And maybe you don't even share it, but you just take a little bit of a risk to try doing something outside of the bounds of these episodes. And then if you submit it, it'd be fun to kind of see what the results were, and I can try my best to give you some feedback on how to make it even better. Because you could see some of the people that like Les and Heidi, Irene, etc., who did such, and we could see how much better the paintings have gotten, especially after they went back and added a little bit more to it. So anyway, Thank you, everyone. Some kudos there in the chat, so I really appreciate all of that. Okay, you guys, thank you again. I'm so touched. Oh my goodness, that's so sweet. I don't know what to say. I'm just blown away. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. I don't know what the weather's like where you are. It's not very pleasant here in Vancouver, so maybe it's a painting afternoon. Okay. Let's see. I think that's all I got to say. That's probably all that you want to hear me say. Have a good night, everybody. We'll see you very, very soon. Okay. Bye-bye.